Festival is informative displays, I'm struck by the number of young people I meet. I stop and talk to a troop of teenagers from the Seppelok Junior Rangers, proudly sporting their smart new uniforms, who greet us with smiles and a genuine pride and joy in their event. Before we leave, I once again bump into the young boy who showed me the hornbills. I experience a sudden and wholly unexpected time shift back 50 years to when I was his age. I remember my own mother used to ferry me around to watch birds, though they were never quite as exotic and exciting as these. "Is your mum a birder too?" I ask him. He pauses for a moment before answering. "No, she's not. But if I'm happy, she's happy." I give a silent thanks to selfless parents who encourage their child's passions, even when they don't always share them. Since I was a fresh-faced 14-year-old, more than 1 in 8 bird species, including many here in Borneo, have become globally threatened with extinction, so sometimes I do find it hard to feel hopeful. But seeing the wide-eyed wonder expressed by the youngsters here at the Borneo Bird Festival, I believe that maybe, just maybe, those hornbills and the rest of the world's 11,000 or so species of birds might, with their help, have a better future.
Stephen Moss. And that's all for this programme. I'm Max Pearson. The producer was Farhana Haider, and we'll be back next weekend here on the BBC World Service.
That was the BBC programme from our own correspondent. I'm Saroja Coelho.
Good morning, Manitoba, and hello, Winnipeg. I'm Marcy Marcus. I hope you had a great weekend, and thanks so much for joining us this morning on Information Radio. 89.3 FM, 990 AM on the app, on YouTube. We're everywhere. And maybe you were this weekend as well. We were down on the river curling with our CBC team in the Ironman Bonspiel. Congratulations, a fundraiser for Heart and Stroke and other charities, and went really well. But the other thing that I noticed was just how many people were on the river. Skating, walking the dogs, pulling the kids in the sleds. Really, really lovely. Sun and cloud today in Winnipeg. Winds will be northwest 20 to 40, a high today of minus 18. And we do have extreme cold warnings for Brandon, Killarney, Melita, Virden, Dauphin, Minnedosa. Very cold wind chills throughout the next couple of days to start the week here. So Information Radio, your morning show is on until 8:37. If you have a problem on the commute, you're going to call Corey Funk. Corey's directing the show, covering weather traffic today. Good morning to Marshall Hodgins as well, who's behind the controls. Marshall's our technical producer this morning on the program. And good morning to Kevin Nipatebo, who's going to say hello to you over YouTube right now. Kevin is our YouTube producer. Heather Wells is in and here with our headlines, and there's lots of news developing. Good morning.
Good morning, yes. Well, some Winnipeg businesses are seeing greater demand for their products as calls to buy local grow louder. Sean Black owns and operates Sheepdog Brew, specializing in cold brew coffee. He has recently signed a deal with Sobeys and Safeway, placing his product in stores right across the province. He says they plan to double production this year to keep up with demand. We'll hear more about that. As well, a longtime nurse at Manitoba's largest hospital says the healthcare system has been broken for most of her career. She's worked for decades at the ER at the Health Sciences Centre and says frontline healthcare workers sometimes endure pure chaos. We'll hear more on that story as well, coming up in our next local news at 6:30.
All right. Thank you, Heather.
You're welcome.
Well, that nurse actually spoke to us in a feature interview, so we're going to roll that out in 2 parts this morning, just around 8 o'clock. So stay tuned for that. In addition, this hour on the program, we're going to be talking about something fun coming up on Friday. It's the bird count across this country, so we're going to hear more about what that might mean for you if you need something peaceful to do. In addition, at 10 to 7 this morning, we're going to talk strategy. Specifically, what is Pierre Poilievre's strategy that may shift to account for new Liberal leadership and challenges with the Trump administration. Speaking of which, next it's time for World Report.
Today on Q.
Don't go to the pub tonight, please. Stay in and give us the money. There are people dying now.
I'm Jill Deacon, sitting in for Tom Power. The new Live Aid musical, Just for One Day, has opened in Toronto. The organizer, Bob Geldof, drops by the Q studio to talk about the production and his memories of the iconic concert back in 1985.
Q, this morning at 10:30 in Newfoundland, and on the CBC Listen app, or wherever you get your podcasts.
This is World Report. Good morning. I'm Marcia Young. U.S. President Donald Trump says he will unveil new tariffs on all imports of steel and aluminum later today, and Canada will not be immediately exempt. About $20 billion in steel trade could be disrupted. As Peter Armstrong tells us, that could drive up costs and slow demand on both sides of the border.
We'll also be announcing steel tariffs on Monday.
That global upending of a critical industry almost seemed like an afterthought. Donald Trump, flying to the Super Bowl, was speaking to reporters about his plan to change the name of the Gulf of Mexico when he pivoted unexpectedly to steel and aluminum imports.
Including Canada and Mexico? Yeah. Any steel coming into the United States is going to have a 25% tariff. What about aluminum, sir? Aluminum, too.
Canada sends about 6 million tons of steel to the U.S. every year. Add another nearly 3 million tons of aluminum. But as we saw when similar tariffs were imposed during Trump's first presidency, tariffs would drive up costs in the U.S. as well. Carl Shimada, chief market strategist at the financial services firm Corpay, says consumers would feel these tariffs quickly.
It'll also raise prices for products made with steel and aluminum, things like cars, appliances, and beer. And that'll make life more difficult for consumers as well as for Canada's manufacturing sector.
The Canadian Steel Producers Association says Canada's worked closely with the American government to address long-standing irritants. It's hoping for an exemption. If not, it says Canada must hit back hard and fast with its own retaliatory tariffs on American steel and aluminum. Peter Armstrong, CBC News, Toronto.
With more on how the Canadian government is responding, let's go to JP Tasker in our Parliamentary Bureau. And JP, what is the reaction so far?
Just when we thought Canada was getting a month-long reprieve from tariffs, President Trump is back with the threats, promising a 25% levy on steel and aluminum imports. He said those tariffs could go into effect as early as today, but we haven't seen anything official from the White House. That's why the Prime Minister's office is not commenting yet. They want to see this tariff threat in writing first before they propose any potential retaliatory measures. But we did hear from Industry Minister François-Philippe Champagne. He says the government will stand up for Canada, and Quebec Premier François Legault, he's urging Canada to renegotiate the new NAFTA right away to bring some more certainty to the trading relationship. Legault is particularly concerned because the province exported some 3 million tons of aluminum last year. There are a lot of jobs on the line in his province.
What could the effect on the economy be with these tariffs?
Well, it's terrible news for Canada's steel and aluminum sectors. Canada is the largest supplier of steel to the United States. If these tariffs go into place, you'll likely see a dip in how much of this product we sell to the U.S. Canadian companies may have a hard time competing on price now that U.S. importers will have to pay a 25% tax to bring in those goods. Here's Catherine Cobden. She's the president and CEO of the Canadian Steel Producers Association.
We are very highly integrated, very dependent on each other economically, and tariffs will have devastating effects on both sides of the border.
Canada has been down this road before. Trump imposed similar tariffs like this in 2018. They were in place for a year, and the data was bleak. Aluminum exports dropped by 50%, steel 30%, according to StatsCan. So this could be a blow to industries that employ more than 35,000 people.
Thank you, JP.
Thank you.
John Paul Tasker reporting from Ottawa. The Trump administration has given U.S. federal workers until the end of the day to voluntarily leave their jobs. If they quit now, they will be paid through September. But it is still not clear whether the offer is legal. The program was temporarily paused last week. Unions filed a lawsuit calling the deal unlawful. A federal judge will hear arguments today. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau is warning world leaders about the impact and speed of artificial intelligence. Trudeau is attending an AI summit in Paris today. He says, like electricity, world leaders need to be prepared for how quickly AI is changing the world.
If we have a similar delay in terms of AI adoption around the world, the consequences will be even more catastrophic and more painful, not just for those who don't have access to it, but for the divisions and the conflicts that will result.
Trudeau says this year developing clean and reliable energy to power AI will be a G7 priority. New Zealand says it has been blindsided by a deal between the Cook Islands and China. They're poised to sign a new strategic partnership this week. But New Zealand officials say they were not informed of the deal. They call the lack of transparency a significant concern. The Cook Islands and New Zealand are supposed to consult each other on matters of defense and security. New Brunswick has the highest rate of child sexual assault cases in this country. The latest crime data from Statistics Canada highlights the problem. As Savannah Odd reports, advocates say the province can do more to prevent the crime and address its lifelong effects.
We live in a province where there have been a lot of history of sexual abuse.
Marie-Andrée Pellon has been studying the issue of child sexual assault in New Brunswick for years. The University of Moncton criminologist even sat on an advisory panel for the province back in 2019.
The report showed that we didn't have some kind of services that was specially trained to help those children.
Pellon says the province has made progress in supporting victims, but the problem has persisted. In 2023, New Brunswick had the highest rate of police-reported sexual assaults of any province for victims under 12 years old, and also between the ages of 12 and 17.
Child sexual abuse is it's more serious than we thought.
Sylvie Leblanc is a social worker and co-director at the Kent Violence Prevention Centre, north of Moncton. She works with youth victims and says sexual assaults on children can have severe long-term consequences, impacts on physical and mental health, and a risk of violence in future relationships.
Sometimes the myth that we have when it comes to children is because they're so young and they don't really understand what's happening, so it doesn't have as much of an impact, but it's really the opposite.
Experts say better sex education and resources for those at risk of offending are key to prevention. Savannah Odd, CBC News, Fredericton.
Air Canada admits it cancelled return tickets for a handful of its passengers in recent years, and they were forced to pay up a second time to get home. The airline says it had no record of the travelers' outbound flight. It calls it a rare technological malfunction, but others call it a safety concern. Erica Johnson has this Go Public investigation.
She was completely bewildered.
Ailey Lim is talking about her aunt, Siokar Lim, who found herself stranded in Budapest last November after Air Canada cancelled her flight home to Montreal. The airline claimed Lim was a no-show on an earlier flight, so cancelled her ticket. Lim, though, wasn't a no-show and had to pay $2,600 to buy a new ticket home. To prove she had flown from Munich to Berlin, Lim had her boarding pass, receipts, and photos standing in front of Berlin landmarks. When she asked for compensation, Air Canada refused. Lim doesn't speak English, so her niece, Ailey Lim, helps tell her story.
I think she felt a little bit gaslit, if I can call it that, because she obviously took the flight.
Go Public has heard from 5 other people, all forced to pay again for tickets home after Air Canada incorrectly deemed them no-shows and cancelled their flights. Not just frustrating and costly, says an expert on airplane passenger boarding methods. John Milne says not knowing how many passengers are on a plane is also a safety concern. He points to the recent crash of an American Airlines plane in Washington.
You're searching for a certain number of people, and maybe you stop too early. Somebody that maybe could have been saved isn't, because you weren't looking for that many people.
Air Canada says these cases were rare, caused by a human error or technological malfunction, but that safety was in no way compromised. He said customers will be contacted for an apology, and so the airline can rectify the situation. Erica Johnson, CBC News, Vancouver.
Bryan Adams is on tour in Australia, but it's not going as planned.
You got to roll the punches, take it on your chin.
His show in Perth was cancelled last night. There was a sewage problem. An enormous fatberg caused wastewater to overflow near the arena where Adams was supposed to perform. And authorities were worried the toilets at the venue would back up, so they called off the show. But the Canadian rocker is going to, as the song says, roll with the punches. He has shows in Sydney, Brisbane, and Melbourne later this week. And that is the latest from World Report. If you are trying to make staying informed a daily habit, you can follow World Report wherever you get your podcasts. I'm Marcia Young.
Like when you ain't got nothing, you got nothing.
It's a crappy situation for Bryan Adams. Yeah, I did it. Monday morning. Look at Corey rolling his eyes like, did you do it? Is your mic on? I did it. I know. It's Monday. Thanks for joining us, everybody. I'm Marcy Marcusa. This is Information Radio. We are live downtown. Time right now is 6:10 a.m., and this is the morning show on 89.3 FM, 990 a.m. on the app and YouTube. I promise no more bad or gross jokes. This hour on the program, we're actually going to be talking about the bird count across this country, calling all bird enthusiasts and citizen scientists. There's a Bird Canada count happening on Friday, on Valentine's Day. We'll tell you all about it and how you can get involved in recording what's happening with the feathery friends in your life. In addition, we're going to hear how a Winnipeg nonprofit is bringing music to your doorstep, literally. We're going to learn more about Home Roots concerts and how you can get involved. So a couple of really nice stories this hour. And then we'll talk Pierre Poilievre's strategy and how he's shifting it to account for new Liberal leadership and challenges with the Trump administration. So we've got that serious political interview coming up just before 7. Right now, let's go to Heather Wells, who's here with other news. Good morning.
Good morning. Well, some Winnipeg businesses are seeing greater demand for their products as calls to buy local grow louder. Local distillery Patent 5 makes gin and whiskey. Co-owner Brock Coote says they've had lots of new customers coming in since the threatened tariffs, and he says they've had quite a few out-of-province orders. Coote would still like to see incentives between provinces to promote interprovincial trade. And a hockey tournament to break barriers. The third annual Lunar New Year hockey tournament was on over the weekend, celebrating Asian culture. Ray Kampfu played goal for the team White Snake. He says growing up in a small Alberta town, he didn't get to play hockey till he was in his 20s because of barriers like cost and language. We're going to hear from him in our next local news coming up at 6:30.
All right, thanks, Heather Wells.
Welcome.
Heather's with us, of course, throughout the morning with newscasts and updates. Right now, let's get into weather and traffic. Corey Funk is covering both this morning as Abby is off. Good morning.
Good morning. Let's start with your weather here. Minus 19 here in Winnipeg. It's only going to warm up to minus 18 today. I don't even know if you can call it warming up, really. That's a bit of a misnomer. 30% chance of flurries here in Winnipeg today. Going to dip down to minus 29 overnight. Then tomorrow, it's going to be even colder. Minus 21 is the high on Tuesday. And just a heads up, I'll have a more in-depth forecast for you later on this hour. But just a reminder that there is an extreme cold warning in effect for much of southwestern Manitoba. That includes Brandon, Clarny, Melita, Verdon, Dauphin, Minnedosa, Riding Mountain. We're talking about frostbite in minutes right there. Overnight low temperatures near minus 30 with winds 20-25. So just very, very cold. Going to feel more like minus 40. So just be bundle up out there. But turning to your traffic right now, it's been pretty quiet out there on the commute. Haven't heard of any issues on the highways or the roads. But if you see something, give me a call on that CBC commuter line. That number 204-788-3093.
Well, let's get started with something nice this morning, shall we? A Winnipeg-based nonprofit wants to transform your living room into the next great concert venue. Home Roots and Chemin Chez Nous are looking for Manitobans to host its next concert series. So the venues can range from community centers or coffee shops or maybe the garage in your family home. To talk more about it, artistic director and co-executive director Leonard Podolak is up early and on Zoom. Hey there, Leonard.
How's it going there, Marcy?
Good. How are you?
Great, you got me up.
I did get you up. What if people are listening and they think, could I really have a concert in my space? What are you looking for, if somebody wants to put their place forward?
Well, basically, it's quite simple. You just need to have enough room in your house to accommodate, 30 or 40 people comfortably. It usually doesn't require a huge house. It just needs one good room. And also, you need to have the kind of personality that goes along with that. You like to have people coming over. You like to bring community together. You like to be a bit of a mover and shaker, and you like folk music, and you see how that could possibly be the catalyst or the excuse to bring the community together. You basically turn your living room or community space into a mini concert venue.
For people that aren't familiar with Home Roots, how long you guys been going with this, and what's the benefit to artists?
Yeah, well, Home Roots started in 2007, and with the idea of forming more infrastructure for musicians to tour the country. It's pretty much whatever level you're at as an artist. If you add up all the work across the country that you could possibly do to go on tour, and you shoved it together in the calendar, it would probably add up to about a month or a month and a half of work. And so these are 2-week tours that we put together of off the beaten path, kind of interesting and unique and intimate community spaces. We bundle them together in 2-week sort of groupings. Each route operates 6 times a year, so each hosts a six concert series, and basically we're trying to make the spaces between gigs shorter for musicians in Canada.
You said lack of infrastructure. What does that look like, and what worries you in our community right now in terms of lack of spaces for people to play?
Well, Winnipeg is one of those rare gems in the world where there isn't really for like local artists. There are many places to play in Winnipeg, but if you're a touring musician, you would play at one of them. So what's great about house concerts is that, you know, they're sort of under the radar, underground a bit. You know, they don't really necessarily compete with mainstream gigs. So it's an opportunity for artists to play more shows in a community or more shows in the surrounding area, like that. And, or, you know, like we hook sometimes up artists up with schools and other community organizations where they can do an extra sort of private show when they come into town. So, it's just to create more places to play.
You said 6 shows, so if somebody's going to put their name forward and be chosen, I guess, to be a concert venue, they're committing to 6 shows.
Yeah, or you know, if somebody feels that 6 shows are too much, then they can partner with somebody else and they could do 3 shows each, or they could partner with 2 other people and do 2 shows each, or they could partner with 5 other people and do 1 show apiece, as long as that route, that stop is still on the route. We try to make it so that, you know, we start the tour on a different day of the week each month, so that, you know, just because you're the one in Altona, you don't always get the Tuesday. You know, you're going to rotate through the week over the course of the season.
Got it. Yeah. Now, you're also committing to have the artist stay with you, right?
That's right. And that's sort of one of the major highlights, I would say, for many of the hosts is just the ability to get to know the artists. You're putting them up, you're feeding them dinner, you're feeding them breakfast, you're trying to make them a nice, comfortable place to sleep for the night. And unlike, you know, going to this, like if you live in a rural community and you know, you go to the city to watch a show, you know, you're filling up the tank of gas, you know, you're going out for dinner, you're staying in a hotel. It's actually probably less of an expense for many of these folks to just open up their homes to musicians, and they come through and then there they are. They get to meet this person who has this whole different life experience.
Yeah, very cool. It's just such a great thing. It's so much fun for as you said, the hosts, and also for those who attend. It's good for the artists. So where can people sign up or inquire more about Home Roots for this year, and what's the deadline look like?
Absolutely. So, well, there is no actual deadline,
okay.
Though the sooner the better. We're starting to plan out next year. We're sort of 2/3 the way through the 24-25 season. It runs in the spring and fall. So for 3 months in the fall, and then 3 months in the spring, and so they can just go to our website, which is homeroots.ca, homeroutes.ca. There's
Perfect.
a little button that says host. And then you fill out a form, and then we get the form, and then we'll give you a call and make an arrangement. And we'll figure out if it's a good fit for each other. But we certainly encourage folks who love music, who love to build community, who love to host, or who may know a really cool community space that's being underutilized, and form a little, you know, mini arts council with their friends. No, you don't have to do that. But yeah, no.
Right on.
give us a call.
Homeroots.ca.
Homeroots.ca.
Before we throw to music here, Leonard, because we've got Tout en vol lined up. We've got a group that's playing actually in Gladstone tonight. But I got to ask you, because you're on YouTube this morning, so radio listeners can't see this, but I want to be where you are. You look like you're like in a log cabin. I'm seeing you on Zoom, and it's just like looks so cozy where you are this morning.
I'm in Home Roots Grand Central Manitoba office, which is my basement. And it's also my recording studio. A lot of music happens in this room.
You're wrapped in wood with lights around you. You look warm.
Yeah,
I like it.
I mean, some people say this is more like a, well, I won't go there because it's my workshop and there's saws hanging down and stuff. But there's also other kind of axes, my banjos and that too. It's a very musical household around here. But give us a shout. Go to the website. We want to expand. We've been slowly building up after COVID. We used to have 11 or 12 routes that operated 6 times each with 12 or 13 houses across the country. We're about half that now, and we're ready to build it up again. And so
very cool.
Yeah, so give us a shout.
Well, maybe the axes inspire some death metal, and then the folk stuff comes from the wood beams. Take care, Leonard. We're going to throw to this tune now. We'll talk to you again, hey?
Thanks a million, Marcy. Really appreciate it.
Leonard, love having him on the show. Leonard Podolak, co-executive and artistic director of Home Roots, Chemin c'est chez nous. So homeroots.ca if you want more information, if you want to sign up as a host. And that music now from Montreal-based folk group Veranda there in Gladstone tonight. This is Tout est en vol. Pardon, Tout est envolé.
T'es envolé comme fanait l'été, comme la noirceur gagnait les airs. Tu siffles ailleurs, ton vent a tourné. Tu t'es envolé avec mon cœur. On dit que le temps emporte le pire. On dit que la peine qui nous déchire pas quelques mois. On dit qu'après la pluie vient le beau temps. Moi je dis que c'était mieux avant que tu partes encore. Mais tu t'es envolé comme fanait l'été, comme la noirceur gagnait les heures. Tu siffles ailleurs, ton vent a tourné. Tu t'es envolé avec mon cœur. Devais repartir pour une saison. Tu m'as fait vivre des joies que je ne connaissais pas. Tu m'as donné toutes les raisons de rire. T'as réchauffé un cœur de givre. Au creux de tes bras. T'es envolé comme fanait l'été, comme la noirceur gagnait les heures. Tu siffles ailleurs, ton vent a tourné. Tu t'es envolé avec mon cœur. Tu t'es envolé avec mon cœur.
Playing in Gladstone tonight, and I believe on to Altona and Portage la Prairie. That is a group out of Montreal. They are Veranda and Tout est envolé avec mon cœur. It is 6:25 a.m. on 89.3 FM, 990 a.m. on the app and YouTube. I'm Marcy Marcusa. Thanks for joining us here this morning with our team at the show. Minus 19, Monday morning, light snow and blowing snow in Winnipeg. And we're going to be right around this temperature for the day because our high is minus 18. And a risk of frostbite, of course, comes with strong winds, and that's across much of the province today. Well, next on the show, let's not think about snow. Let's think about birds. I have to say, with the days getting just a touch longer now, I was getting up yesterday morning Saturday morning, I got up a bit early and I went outside, take the dogs out, and I heard the birds. And I thought, those guys aren't always singing. Like when it's minus 40, they're not out singing. So I don't know if they've returned or if they're just like up early because it was not too bad early in the morning Saturday. But it sure is nice to hear them. Canadians are in fact flocking toward bird watching. According to the latest data from Statistics Canada, over 1 in 10 households in this country participate in bird watching or photography. This weekend, the 28th annual Great Backyard Bird Count is happening. It's on Friday. So what happens is over the course of 4 days, bird lovers of all ages are encouraged to count different species of our feathered friends. And to talk about it, Jody Allaire is back, Director of Communications with Birds Canada. We talked most years about the bird count. Good morning to you.
Good morning.
So for people that don't know what this is, what's the purpose of this, the Great Backyard Bird Count?
Yeah, so it's a 4-day event, and it's an annual global program run by Birds Canada, Audubon, and the Cornell Lab of Ornithology, and we are encouraging people to go out birding over this 4-day period starting this Friday, and the goal is to really get a snapshot of the world's birds that will help scientists better understand and protect birds. But in addition to that, it also provides a really great opportunity for people that are, new to birding or maybe just a bit bird curious. Maybe a bit nervous to take the plunge into birding. No need to be nervous. A program like this is just a fantastic place to start on your birding journey.
Where do you log the information? Like if someone says, "Okay, I'll do it," and then what happens with it?
Yeah, that's right. So, the commitment is really small. So the first thing I would do is recommend people go to the website, birdcount.org. Lots of good resources on there. And, there's really simple steps. All you do first is just decide where to go birding. So whether that's your backyard or a local green space, anywhere there's some nice mix of habitat is good. If there's any open water, that's really good. You watch birds for like 15 minutes, or more, and you can do that as often as you want throughout the 4 days. But 15 minutes is the time commitment. And in terms of entering your sightings, if you're a beginning birder or new to bird identification, highly recommend downloading the Merlin Bird ID app. It's a free app. It actually helps you identify the bird sounds that you hear when you're out letting your dogs out first thing in the morning and you hear some birds singing. Merlin Bird ID app, it will identify those for you. And you can actually submit records straight through the Merlin Bird ID app. So that's a great place for people that are new. But if you're a little bit more experienced birder, then you could enter checklists on eBird. And all of that data is compiled into the Great Backyard Bird Count summary.
You've done this for 28 times already. What kinds of things have you learned that have been most interesting in previous years because of the data from the count?
Yeah, so I think there's a couple of things. I think, there's sort of the human side and the bird side. And I think just from the human side, some of the data that I think is really interesting is how gung-ho people are about this program. Like people really want to participate in this type of program. And especially in Canada. Canada, we had the third highest participation rate in the world last year, behind only the U.S. and India. 640,000 people participated last year in the Great Backyard Bird Count. And in Canada, 45,000 people participated over that Valentine's Family Day long weekend, which is a lot. And so this program is really engaging the people. But the data that we collect, especially any kind of long-term data set like this over 28 years, really can show you some interesting things. One is, how the distribution and population of birds are doing, but it's also showing us trends. And some of those trends, is how our typically, although it's pretty cold this morning, our winters are getting warmer, and there's more open water further north, and so we're getting more and more waterfowl. overwintering, right? And we're also seeing expansion of species like Eurasian collar doves through the prairies, and even things like American robins wintering further north, which is really interesting. And it also gives us an opportunity to track birds that are in decline, like evening grosbeaks. So evening grosbeaks are often detected on the Great Backyard Bird Count, and that's a species that's declined by 83% in Canada, since the 1970s.
We'll have to leave our conversation there. Jody, I'll leave people with the website, and thank you so much for your time.
Okay, thank you.
So the Bird Count, Friday, birdcount.org for more info. Jody Allaire, Director of Communications with Birds Canada. Your CBC Winnipeg News is next.
This is CBC News. Good morning. I'm Heather Wells in Winnipeg. At 6:30, it is -19. We are starting a frigid February week. In Winnipeg today, a mix of sun and clouds, a high of -18 with a risk of frostbite. In western Manitoba, an extreme cold warning expected to be a multi-day event with wind chills nearing -40. U.S. President Donald Trump says he will unveil new tariffs on all imports of steel and aluminum later today.
Any steel coming into the United States is going to have a 25% tariff.
What about aluminum, sir?
Aluminum, too.
And Trump says Canada will not be exempt. Catherine Cobden is president and CEO of the Canadian Steel Producers Association.
Well, certainly we're very concerned. We do not yet know the details. We do not, for example, know whether for sure Canada would be included. I would hope that our primary objective as a country is to get us excluded from these tariffs. And I think that we have a very compelling story to tell as Canada. We've done some incredible things. If these tariffs proceed, they will be devastating.
Canada provides 20% of the imported steel in the U.S. Now, threatened tariffs from the U.S. have some Winnipeg businesses seeing more demand for their products on grocery store shelves. Sean Black owns and operates Sheepdog Brew, specializing in cold brew coffee. They are scrambling to keep up with orders. In the last week alone, they've had 15 stores calling for their product.
We plan to be double the size this year. And I think we might beat that just based on some of the demand we're seeing already. Next week, we're going to be making or producing about 25,000 cans, and we're doing that every couple weeks now.
Black says they just signed a deal with Sobeys and Safeway, putting their product in every Sobeys and Safeway in the province. In a statement, a Sobeys spokesperson says in light of recent developments, they're working to amplify this very successful local program while also accelerating the sourcing of Canadian products as alternatives to products on the tariff list. Here are the latest on tariff threats and Canadian sovereignty, as well as other national and international news coming up on World Report at 7. A veteran nurse in Manitoba's largest hospital is speaking out about conditions in the emergency room. The nurse has worked for decades in the ER at the Health Sciences Centre. She says patients with drug problems, a shortage of staff, and not enough beds often add to chaos. She says the crowding gets even worse when it's freezing cold outside.
Some nights there's 30 people at 3 o'clock in the morning, 30 people in the waiting room, and 4 of them actually have medical problems. And the rest are just there because it's cold.
CBC has concealed the nurse's voice and identity to protect her job. Premier Wab Kinew says in order for the province to fix health care, it needs more people on the front lines. He says there are 1,255 more healthcare staff now working in Manitoba than last April, and more security staff, he says, will be added across the system. You can hear more on this story coming up in the next hour right here on Information Radio. A University of Manitoba student is turning his grief into action and wants to make more safe spaces for men to talk about their mental health. Vaibhav Varma's brother, Yash, died by suicide in 2023 at the age of 16. While his death was devastating, Varma says it also motivated him to help others. One of the ways he's doing that is creating a men's wellness club at the University of Manitoba.
I realized that if my brother was struggling and no one knew about it, I was struggling in my own way after my brother's death. There are plenty of other students who are in the same boat or are simply looking for someone to chat with.
Varma's Men's Wellness Circle UM recently had its first event called Wings and Wellness. Ray Camfu grew up loving hockey, but never imagined he could play. The Laotian Canadian was in net for the third annual Lunar New Year hockey tournament this past weekend. That's what you're just hearing there. Camfu grew up in a small Alberta town where he says there were a lot of barriers to being able to play hockey, like cost, language, and a lack of representation in the sport.
What matters what we see on TV, what matters what we see in the movies and in the papers, that there is other color in the world, and that we don't have to be reserved to just being the ones observing, that we can be the ones participating.
Now, Camfu says his son plays hockey. This weekend's 4-day event was hosted by the Winnipeg Emperors Hockey Club. And finally, in sports.
For the second time, the Vince Lombardi Trophy is headed to Philadelphia. Eagles fly in Super Bowl 59.
The Philadelphia Eagles winning the Super Bowl last night, beating the Kansas City Chiefs. It wasn't even close, 40-22, denying the Chiefs a third straight Super Bowl victory. You can find more Manitoba news updated throughout the day. All you have to do is head to cbc.ca/Manitoba.
What was that game? I thought it was supposed to be close.
I know.
Like, I don't follow a lot of NFL football. I always watch big games and there's stuff at stakes. My husband's like, oh yeah, settle in. It's going to be a good game, good game.
Not a single
What
score
the
by
heck?
Kansas City in the first half.
I know. I stopped
Not
pretty
a point.
much watching. I mean, I was in and out of it in the second half, kind of opened one eye. I was kind of half sleeping. Well, it was just, wow, somebody won and lost a lot of money last night.
Oh, my, yeah.
Right? That was not what the odds said. All right, thanks, Heather.
You're welcome.
Let's get into what's going on in the weather forecast and in traffic. Corey's covering actually both. Abby is off today, so it's regional forecast time, Corey.
Yeah, minus 19 right now. We'll start here in Winnipeg, and we are dipping down to, or we're warming up ever so slightly to minus 18 today. 30% chance or so of flurries today. Could dip down to minus 29 overnight. And you could just pretty much, if you're looking ahead for the week, hate to be the bearer of bad news, but it's going to be cold all week. Cold and sunny, though. I'll give you that. Minus 21 is the high tomorrow. It's going to be near that, more or less, for the rest of the week as well. Let's look up to the Western Manitoba, where there's actually a extreme cold warning in effect for much of that region. Brandon, Clarny, Melita, Verdon, Dauphin, Minnedosa, that whole area there is under this extreme cold warning right now. We're talking about cold temperatures near minus 30 this morning, but it feels more like minus 40. So we're talking about frostbite in a minute. So bundle up there. Right now in Brandon, it is minus 26. It is going up to minus 23, but like I said, with that wind chill, it's going to feel much, much colder. Dauphin, similar story, minus 24 right now. Your high today is minus 20. Up north, Thompson, good morning to you. Minus 28 you are right now, and you're heading for a high today of minus 21. You have a 30% chance of snow today. So very cold all across the province today, but Winnipeg right now we are sitting at minus 19. Heading to looking at your traffic right now, really haven't heard of any major issues on the commuter line. Highways actually also all look pretty good, south and north. If you are around Gillam or Lynn Lake, those highways there, at least according to Manitoba 511, are looking like poor visibility with some covered highway conditions. Other than that, down south here in southern Manitoba, looks like highways are looking okay. But if you see anything going on, if you're walking, biking, driving, sidewalks were lovely on my run in this morning. Give me a call, 204-788-3093.
Before you go, Corey, and before business news, because Crystal Lee's coming up next, but why don't we talk about what, well, at least in my view, a lot of people have on their minds. So the Prime Minister said on Friday that Donald Trump's comments about making Canada the 51st state are, quote, a real thing, end quote. We've asked you how you're processing that. So if you want to weigh in on how you're processing that, you can write to us on my Marcy Marcusa Facebook page. It acts as a show page during the show. Or you can call us during the show and we'll get some calls on, or you can just say, share my comments, but maybe not my voice. I mean, there's various ways. Well, it's all outlined when you call the listener line. But if you want to call, 788-3205, 788-3205. A lot of people in your world talking about this.
I mean,
who's not?
I was at a Super Bowl party yesterday, and like everyone's just kind of, that's what everyone's talking about when they're not watching football. It's Yeah.
The patriotism, of course, and the ads is, I found that ads that previously I felt like I'd seen, there's like new taglines that are added that say, by the way, made in Canada, or it'll say, by the way, processed in Canada, or there's a plant in Montreal that does X, Y, and Z. Or
And it speaks to that kind of heightened sense of Canadian identity that I think a lot of people are feeling right now.
Yesterday, I was in Polo Park. I saw a shirt in one of the displays that just simply said Canada. It was a black sweatshirt, and the writing said Canada is not for sale. So, you're seeing it everywhere, right? So we've asked you how you're processing that. Some of you are already writing in, and some of you are writing in with your questions. Some of you are writing in to acknowledge some fears that you have about what might be happening, and some are writing in about context. So here's some comments, just briefly. Kim Gilman says, I'm more determined than ever to do everything possible to buy Canadian and stay Canadian, and join many other Canadians determined that our country stays the true north, strong and free. We do have Cam Bennett writing in, it's most disturbing to me that there are Canadians who seem perfectly okay if it happens, talking about annexation. So obviously in his world, he's heard some of that conversation. In addition, Catherine Giesbrecht is asking questions here. So obviously getting ahead of a lot of what's developing, but still questions. On her mind, will Trump take away our public health care system? Will he change our gun ownership laws? Does he understand that we do not want to be Americans? Catherine writes. And then finally, Rick Stefanko writing in, this is very disturbing and upsetting. NATO would be compelled to act in our defense. So a lot of you writing in this morning, there's obviously a need for us to process and talk about this as Canadians. So do that, 788-3205. Let's get to business news now with Christely Ramlakan. Good morning to you.
Hey, good morning, Marcy. And similar with conversations at the Super Bowl party that I was also at, and also noticing those commercials. So not just there in Winnipeg, I'm here in Ottawa. So I'm sure this is happening across the country, these conversations.
Absolutely. Now, the business lens on it is still looking at tariffs, because that's the other thing that's developing today. Donald Trump saying yesterday, I think he was on Air Force One going to the Super Bowl, and he just kind of casually throws out, by the way, tomorrow, he says he's going to announce a 25% tariff on steel and aluminum imports today. That includes from our country, from Canada. What do you know so far? What is this looking like this morning?
Yeah, that's right. And Trump also said he would announce reciprocal tariffs probably tomorrow or Wednesday, which means the U.S. would impose import duties on products where another country has levied duties on U.S. goods. That is something that the Canadian government has put out there that it might do if we see tariffs. Now, Industry Minister Francois-Philippe Champagne says Canadian steel and aluminum support key industries in the U.S., including defense, shipbuilding, and the auto sector. Catherine Cobden is the president and CEO of the Canadian Steel Producers Association, and she says she is concerned, but notes details are still to be confirmed.
If these tariffs proceed, it's like they will be devastating, but challenging on both sides of the border, in fact, not just on Canada. So as the United States' largest trading partner on steel, we represent about 20% of all of their steel imports, and they represent about 40% of ours. So we are very highly integrated, very dependent on each other economically, and tariffs will have devastating effects on both sides of the border.
So she says Canada should try to get an exemption, and if it can't, she says there's a very strong necessity to respond hard and fast with retaliatory tariffs of our own. Now, Trump imposed steel and aluminum tariffs during his first term in March of 2018 using national security as a justification, and Canada was initially given an exemption, but it was ultimately hit by the tariffs in May of 2018, and Canada responded with counter tariffs on American products such as Florida orange juice. And nearly a year later, the White House announced a deal had been reached ending that trade dispute. So we'll have to wait and see what happens this time.
Let's go to another story. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau did not respond to reporters' questions about Trump's tariff announcement yesterday, but he is in Paris for a summit on artificial intelligence and had quite a lot to say about this. Can you share more about this summit?
Yes. So Trudeau says developing more electricity to power artificial intelligence will be a key priority of the G7 this year as Canada assumes the presidency of the multinational body. So Trudeau made the comments in Paris yesterday, as you were saying, ahead of this global summit that begins today. But Trudeau also says increased power generation shouldn't come at the expense of addressing climate change. So he says nuclear energy will be a crucial part of the solution and says the necessary infrastructure must be built. But the Prime Minister also said just as much thought needs to be put into ways to reduce the energy demand of AI. So the technology notably requires a significant amount of electricity to work. Now, this AI Action Summit is expected to include nearly 100 heads of state and government and almost 1,000 civil society stakeholders from about 100 countries. And experts say it offers a chance to demonstrate Canada's strength when it comes to artificial intelligence. So they say Canada has been a leader in AI governance, citing the 2017 Montreal Declaration on Responsible AI. And then also in 2020, Canada and France launched the Global Partnership on Artificial Intelligence, which is now being integrated with the OECD.
And before we look at numbers this morning in the markets, I hear another airline's changing the way we're going to pay for baggage.
Yes, so Air Transat will no longer offer free carry-on baggage on its cheapest fares for some flights starting tomorrow. So the Montreal-based airline is matching other Canadian companies, including Air Canada and WestJet, which have also dropped free carry-on baggage for their cheapest fares. So travelers using the lowest fare option can only bring on a personal item such as a purse or a small backpack to their seat. All other baggage is subject to fees. So Air Transat says the fees will vary depending on the destination, but the first bag will cost between $35 and $50. The second bag will cost between $55 and $83. And Air Transat is also ending that one free checked item for its Eco Standard fare class as well, which is its second lowest option for those same destinations. And the company says the changes will allow travelers to only pay for the services they really need.
Quick check on the markets this morning, Crystal Lee.
In Europe, stocks are shrugging off the tariff threats. Germany, the UK, and France are all up. In Asia, markets are mixed. Japan, Shanghai, and Hong Kong are all up. Oil is up 88 cents to $71.88 US per barrel. Gold is up $44 to $2,904.10 US per ounce. And the dollar is down almost 0.2 of a cent to 69.8 cents US.
All right, Crystal Lee, we'll talk to you tomorrow.
Thanks, Marcy.
That is Crystal Lee Ramlicam with Business News. 13 minutes now to 7 o'clock, minus 19 in Winnipeg, minus 26 in Brandon, mainly clear. Light snow in Thompson and minus 28. Up around Dauphin, frostbite in minutes. There is an extreme cold warning for areas around Brandon, Melita, Killarney, Verdun, Dauphin, and Minnedosa. So very, very cold. As we said, wind chills are making it feel like minus values of minus 40 this morning. And that means, frostbite in minutes. Well, as you've been hearing on the news already, we are talking, CBC has heard from a nurse who works in the HSCER, and she gives us an inside look at the front line. We are going to roll out a 2-part interview in the next hour of the show, but part of that inside look includes how often the department, the ER at HSC, is full of folks who are not there for healthcare.
Some nights there's 30 people at 3 o'clock in the morning, 30 people in the waiting room, and 4 of them actually have medical problems. And the rest are just there because it's cold.
And when did that number start to shift like that? Because that wouldn't have been...
But it differs every day, so it's not really like a set number.
Yeah, I get
that. I mean, it's an average. Yeah. Sometimes we look and go, oh, we don't have any patients. They're all just here for shelter now. We got everybody else in.
She says she knows some of them so well that she calls them quote unquote regulars. And at times around the holidays, nurses will make gifts for people. But how does that shift what her job as a nurse, how does that affect that? She's there to be an ER nurse. So she talks about that and more. Stay tuned. We have that two-part interview coming up in the next hour of the show. It's 12 minutes to 7 o'clock on 89.3 FM. And next on the program, we're going to be talking about Pierre Poilievre's strategy in a moment. His strategy in terms of the Liberals still looking for now a new leader, and then also what's happening down south with the threat of Donald Trump and the tariffs. So we're going to hear more about that. But first, let's set up the tariff conversation, because this weekend on Cross Country Checkup, you were weighing in on what grade you're giving the Trudeau government on Trump's tariff threat. Here's some of those calls.
Helga, you think Mark Carney would be the best person to be face to face with Donald Trump on this? Why?
Well, because it has to be done very carefully, very systematically. Mark Carney has the education. He was a governor of the Bank of Canada. He was a governor of the Bank of England. He's an economist. It's the long view that is much more important than the reaction that we would have right now to something Trump is doing, because this is what Trump really wants.
Mm-hmm.
He wants us to react.
I think for me personally, Trudeau was the worst prime minister we've ever had. And my next vote will be for Poilievre. I never thought that I would say this, but Trump's a bully. He doesn't need a Mark Carney. Mr. Carney looks like a very nice person, very well educated and talented. But Trump cannot deal with people like that because he's not like that. So I think Poilievre, you put him in a ring, in a boxing ring, he stands a chance.
You think Freeland is the best option? Well, why do you think she's the person to handle President Trump on behalf of Canada?
She certainly has experience in office. And she's done some great work, and I feel like she can stand up to Trump. She's, got the values and the ethics. She really was a strong voice with Ukraine. So she's got the fortitude and the experience to deal with someone like Trump. It's just really motivated me to become much more active in the next federal election. Because to make sure that Pierre Poilievre does not get in. I feel like he is very much in line with a Trump-type character, and he's a bully.
So that's Cross Country Checkup, and people weighing in on what they're looking for in the next Liberal leader, whomever that may be. So people talking about supporting Freeland, but others they're also saying none of the Liberals. I'm just straight thinking about Pierre Poilievre and the Conservative Party. They are, of course, ahead in the polls. So let's frame this in the U.S. context and then talk more about Conservative strategy. Later today, the thing this morning everyone's talking about is steel and aluminum. Because when it comes to tariffs, U.S. President Donald Trump is expecting to announce the 25% tariffs on all steel and aluminum imports, including from Canada and Mexico. And we're still waiting to see if that is going to happen today. So we're keeping an eye on that closely. But meantime, in the face of all of this, right, Conservative opposition leader Pierre Poilievre is trying to position himself as the best person to lead Canada. So today he's going to be speaking as well. At 8 o'clock this morning, he's expected to release his plan to protect Canada's far north. The chairman of Summa Strategies is our next guest, and government relations firm in Ottawa. Tim Powers is also managing director of Abacus Data. He's also a former advisor to Conservative political leaders, and he's here to talk Poilievre. Good morning.
Good morning. Nice to talk to you.
Nice to have you on. So do you think that Poilievre has to reposition himself? Like if you actually, it feels like 1,000 years ago, but if you go back to December, and what he might have been saying to try to strengthen his messages, how much does he have to shift now because of what's happening with the states?
Well, I think you obviously have to be prepared to deal with Donald Trump as best as anybody in the world can deal with him. And certainly right now, and how couldn't it be, all of our space and place is occupied by what will Trump do. You rightly pointed out. Now we have the 25% steel and aluminum tariff apparently coming today. We'll have to wait and see. So Poilievre, in the last number of weeks, has talked about how he would deal with Trump, released a 7-point plan on that, as you pointed out, talking about northern sovereignty today. But I do think he's still going to hover around and stay firm on issues of affordability because the discontent that Canadians have around their lots in lives and the costs of things is real, and he apparently, over the last 2 years, has struck a chord on that.
How does he position himself to be not like Trump for those that are lumping him into that kind of a category?
Well, that's a pretty tried and not always true Liberal strategy. You'll remember the Paul Martin Liberals used to suggest Stephen Harper was like George W. Bush. I almost wish George W. Bush was back in some ways.
And it's strange to look at him in hindsight now, just in the face of today, isn't it? Yes, it is.
Exactly. I think, look, Polyev is used to this attempted framing, and I think he will say, look, where's the comparison? Where's the truth? Where's the truth in advertising, if you will, on all of that? He's pushed back firmly on Trump. He's refuted any sort of embrace of Trump. He smartly, and I think this was smart, has not gone down to visit the U.S. president and get framed in that light. You'll remember years and years ago, when you and I were both just children, of course, Prime Minister Brian Mulroney, when he was opposition leader, Brian Mulroney went down to see then Republican President Ronald Reagan to help build a rapport. So Polyev is aware of that critique. He's pushing back forcefully on it, and I think he would say, show me the evidence that this is actually born to be true.
On Friday, of course, everyone's responding to Prime Minister Justin Trudeau being caught on that hot mic saying that Trump's threats to make Canada the 51st state were, quote, a real thing, end quote. Our listeners are responding this morning, some with questions, some with fears. Trump reiterated those threats again yesterday, though. How has the Conservative Party responded to that challenge specifically?
Yeah, and Trump said as much as you said on his interview on the way down to the Super Bowl yesterday. Look, I think like our Prime Minister, like your Premier Scott Moe and others,
Ours is Wabkanu, just putting out there.
Sorry, Wabkanu. I'm in Winnipeg now.
It's okay.
Sorry, I've been all around the country this morning.
Yeah,
I
totally
apologize.
Get it. It's all right.
Premier Canoe and others have said, look, we are Canada. We are an independent Canada. We're going to be an independent Canada. And that, I think, is what he's going to continue to say. I don't think you're going to see any variation on that, where, again, I suspect he will point blame is not just at Trump's bellicose bullying nature, but also to suggest we're in this state of vulnerability because of what the Liberals did over the last 9 or 10 years. So that is what we're seeing right now from Polyev.
Just last, if the carbon tax and Trudeau's leadership are no longer key ballot box questions, what do you view as the key question?
Well, I don't think we've parked the carbon price yet, because don't forget, and lots of Manitobans, I know where I am now, will know this, because as of April 1st, right now, there's still a carbon tax increase coming. The two main Liberal leadership candidates, Mark Carney and Chrystia Freeland, say they will get rid of it. Will it actually be gone on April 1st? Assuming it eventually goes, I think, though, Conservatives will continue to focus on affordability and the fact that things are still more expensive, and whether it's the carbon price or something else, that the challenges are there, and they will find a new symbol. The carbon tax, as Pierre Poilievre framed it, was the symbol for the Justin Trudeau referendum he wanted to have. I think he'll find a new symbol that connects with Canadians, or he hopes will connect with Canadians on affordability.
Thank you very much for this, Tim. I appreciate your time.
Thank you.
That's Tim Powers, Chairman of Assuma Strategies and Managing Director of Abacus Data, and a former advisor to Conservative political leaders. It is now 3 minutes to 7. Heather Wells is back with news headlines.
Good morning. Well, some Manitoba businesses are seeing greater demand for their products as calls to buy local grow louder. Local distillery Patent 5 makes gin and whiskey. Co-owner Brock Coots says they've had lots of new customers coming in since the threatened tariffs, and they've had quite a few out-of-province orders. Coots would still like to see more incentives between provinces to promote interprovincial trade. And a longtime nurse at Manitoba's largest hospital says the healthcare system has been broken for most of her career. The nurse has worked for decades in the ER at Winnipeg's Health Sciences Centre, and she says frontline healthcare workers sometimes endure pure chaos. We'll hear more coming up in our next local news at 7:30.
Thanks, Heather.
You're welcome.
Minus 19 with light snow and blowing snow in Winnipeg. It's going to be a cold week all week long, and today will only be around minus 18. Wind chill will be up around minus 30, so bundle up if you're heading out with winds right now northwest at 24. The commute so far so good, 788-3093 if you need to update Corey with anything going on. Well, the next hour of the show, how are you enjoying winter? We want to know how you're making the season more bearable. We're running a contest that we're going to launch. We're asking you to show us your winter. You could win a prize. We'll share more about that. That's coming up in the next hour. In addition to the next hour of Information Radio, we'll build on that story Heather had news about Manitoba business owners saying a push to shop local right now because of what the threats coming out of the States is having a positive impact. So we will hear more about that. And then something completely different. A Manitoba man was cut out of his girlfriend's life, he says, because he wasn't Pakistani like her family. And he has a new documentary that delves into what he calls interracial relationships. We're going to talk to him coming up all about that. That's coming up at 7:40. And part one of that feature interview with the nurse at the HSCER. Stay tuned.
The current.
So I come because if I didn't come, I don't think I'd be able to walk. I'd be probably in a wheelchair by now.
Canadian doctors should be prescribing exercise to their patients, particularly older ones, says a new study. We will hear from people over 80 about what working out does for them and why it's fun, not just torture. It's coming up on The Current.
The Current with Matt Galloway. This morning at 8:37, 9:07 in Newfoundland, and on the CBC Listen app.
This is World Report. Good morning. I'm Marcia Young. U.S. President Donald Trump says he will unveil new tariffs on all imports of steel and aluminum later today. And Canada will not be immediately exempt. Catherine Cobden is president and CEO of the Canadian Steel Producers Association.
We represent about 20% of all of their steel imports, and they represent about 40% of ours.
About $20 billion in steel trade could be disrupted. As Peter Armstrong tells us, that could drive up costs and slow demand on both sides of the border.
We'll also be announcing steel tariffs on Monday.
That global upending of a critical industry almost seemed like an afterthought. Donald Trump, flying to the Super Bowl, was speaking to reporters about his plan to change the name of the Gulf of Mexico when he pivoted unexpectedly to steel and aluminum imports.
Including Canada and Mexico?
Yeah, any steel coming into the United States is going to have a 25% tariff.
What about aluminum, sir?
Aluminum too.
Canada sends about 6 million tons of steel to the U.S. every year. Add another nearly 3 million tons of aluminum. But as we saw when similar tariffs were imposed during Trump's first presidency, tariffs would drive up costs in the U.S. as well. Carl Shimada, chief market strategist at the financial services firm Corpay, says consumers would feel these tariffs quickly.
It'll also raise prices for products made with steel and aluminum, things like cars, appliances, and beer. And that'll make life more difficult for consumers as well as for Canada's manufacturing sector.
The Canadian Steel Producers Association says Canada's worked closely with the American government to address long-standing irritants. It's hoping for an exemption. If not, it says Canada must hit back hard and fast with its own retaliatory tariffs on American steel and aluminum. Peter Armstrong, CBC News, Toronto.
Canada's ambassador to France, Stéphane Dion, says the government is working with EU countries to push back against new tariffs.
Canada and Mexico are the first ones, but Europeans know that they may be targeted as well. They are working with us about how can we have a cohesive way to convince the U.S. administration that trade wars are painful for everyone and not something that you should do between friends.
EU steel may also be affected by Trump's threatened tariffs, but the European Commission says it will not respond until it sees details. On social media, Canadian Industry Minister François-Philippe Champagne says a steel and aluminum tax could hurt the U.S. He says Canadian steel and aluminum is key for U.S. defense, shipbuilding, and auto industries. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau is still in Paris, and so far he's not answering reporter questions about Trump's latest comments.
Are you going to retaliate? Is Canada a viable country?
Later this morning, Trudeau will attend a summit on artificial intelligence. He's urging global leaders to work together to ensure the technology is developed responsibly. As Olivia Stefanovich reports, most countries are unprepared for how fast AI is moving.
Artificial intelligence is going to have the kind of impact on our society that the development of electricity did.
Just before the AI summit began, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau issued a warning to world leaders.
If we have a similar delay in terms of AI adoption around the world, the consequences will be even more catastrophic and more painful, not just for those who don't have access to it, but for the divisions and the conflicts that will result.
Trudeau is urging his global counterparts gathering in Paris this week to work together on a solution as the U.S. and China vie for AI dominance.
We're at a pivotal moment.
However, without more guardrails, cybersecurity expert Francis Sims says misinformation and disinformation could spread faster than ever before.
Basically, if we don't start writing the rules for AI today, then AI is effectively going to tell us what to do tomorrow.
But there's resistance from big tech companies, putting more pressure on international heads of states to demand better protections and leave the next 2 days of meetings with concrete action. Olivia Stefanovich, CBC News, Paris.
Opening statements are expected today in the trial of the man accused of trying to kill author Salman Rushdie. He was stabbed more than a dozen times and left partially blind by a knife-wielding attacker in August 2022. Rushdie spoke about the ordeal to CBC Radio's Nella Ayed.
Yeah, it's weird, isn't it, that the thing you most fear is what happens. I mean, I've always had a fear of blindness. I mean, I was thinking about, if you're asked which of your senses could you do without, I think sight is, for me, the most important.
27-year-old Hadi Matar is charged with attempted murder and assault. He has pleaded not guilty. Rushdie is expected to testify during the trial. In the Ontario election, the parties trying to defeat Doug Ford's Progressive Conservatives are pushing to make access to family doctors a top campaign issue. As Mike Crawley reports, roughly 2.5 million people in Ontario do not have a family physician.
Really a challenge to find somebody.
Louise Lee lives just outside Ottawa. Since her family doctor announced plans to retire 2 years ago, Lee has searched all over for a replacement.
Anyone who mentioned seeing a doctor, going to a doctor, we would say, are they taking patients?
Lee finally got on a clinic's roster in December. And now that it's election time in Ontario?
For me, it is a big factor in how I'm going to choose to vote.
Healthcare is the biggest expense of every provincial government, and it's often the biggest issue in provincial elections. Doug Ford's PC party has not made healthcare the focus of any campaign event so far, and when Ford is asked about it, he pivots to the threat of tariffs.
This is all about protecting the economy, protecting jobs, because if we don't have an economy, we don't have health care, we don't have education.
Ford's biggest rivals, NDP leader Marit Stiles and Liberal leader Bonnie Crombie, have both unveiled multi-billion-dollar plans they say would guarantee all Ontarians a family doctor within 4 years.
If you want to form government in this province, you have to tackle healthcare.
Dominic Novak is a family doctor and president of the Ontario Medical Association, which represents physicians.
What we're encouraging voters to do is vote based on who they trust to deliver on getting our healthcare system back on track.
Election day in Ontario is 2 weeks from Thursday. Mike Crawley, CBC News, Toronto.
Most of the flights in and out of St. John's International Airport are cancelled or delayed. A blizzard is bringing snow and gusting winds to Newfoundland. Environment Canada is warning there is zero visibility at times. More than 30 centimeters of snow have already fallen across the Avalon Peninsula, and another 5 to 10 centimeters is forecast for today. People are advised to postpone non-essential travel. Meantime, in Western Canada, there are extreme cold warnings for much of Alberta and Saskatchewan. Some parts will feel like minus 45 with the wind chill. Air Canada admits it's canceled return tickets for a handful of its passengers in recent years, and they were forced to pay up a second time to get home. The airline says it had no record of the traveler's outbound flight. It calls it a rare technological malfunction, but others call it a safety concern. Erica Johnson has this Go Public investigation.
She was completely bewildered.
Aili Lim is talking about her aunt, Siokar Lim, who found herself stranded in Budapest last November after Air Canada cancelled her flight home to Montreal. The airline claimed Lim was a no-show on an earlier flight, so cancelled her ticket. Lim, though, wasn't a no-show and had to pay $2,600 to buy a new ticket home. To prove she had flown from Munich to Berlin, Lim had her boarding pass, receipts, and photos standing in front of Berlin landmarks. When she asked for compensation, Air Canada refused. Lim doesn't speak English, so her niece, Aili Lim, helps tell her story.
I think she felt a little bit gaslit, if I can call it that, because she obviously took the flight.
Go Public has heard from 5 other people, all forced to pay again for tickets home after Air Canada incorrectly deemed them no-shows and cancelled their flights. Not just frustrating and costly, says an expert on airplane passenger boarding methods. John Milne says not knowing how many passengers are on a plane is also a safety concern. He points to the recent crash of an American Airlines plane in Washington.
You're searching for a certain number of people, and maybe you stop too early. Somebody that maybe could have been saved isn't, because you weren't looking for that many people.
Air Canada says these cases were rare, caused by a human error or technological malfunction, but that safety was in no way compromised. He said customers will be contacted for an apology, and so the airline can rectify the situation. Erica Johnson, CBC News, Vancouver.
And that is the latest from World Report. Listening to World Report is the easiest way to stay on top of the news, but we need help getting the word out. You can help today by hitting the follow button on your preferred podcast app. I'm Marcia Young.
Good morning, Manitoba, and hello, Winnipeg. It's going to be frigid this week. In the city, it's already minus 19. I should say only minus 19 in Winnipeg right now. Thanks for joining us. I'm Marcy Marcusa. This is Information Radio on CBC, 89.3 FM, 990 AM on the app and YouTube. Well, the Health Sciences Centre is Manitoba's largest healthcare facility, and it's been an extraordinary year so far for the HSCER. A man died there waiting for care in January. We had the code orange that was called during a blizzard, also in January. This hour on the show, part 1 of a 2-part interview, a rare look at the front lines of the HSCER for a nurse who's worked for decades at the hospital. So stay tuned. We will have that for you coming up just around 8 o'clock. 10-2 is their first interview. In addition, we're launching a contest today. It's all about love in winter and how you beat the cold. First, though, let's go to Heather Wells. She's in with other headlines. Good morning.
Good morning. Well, some Manitoba businesses are seeing growing demand for their products as calls to buy local also grow louder. Sean Black owns and operates Sheepdog Brew, specializing in cold brew coffee. He's recently signed a deal with Sobeys and Safeway, placing his product in stores right across the province. And Black says they plan to double production this year to keep up with demand. A hockey tournament to break barriers. The 3rd annual Lunar New Year hockey tournament was on over the weekend, celebrating Asian culture. Ray Kampfu played goal for Team Whitesnake. He says growing up in a small Alberta town, he didn't get to play hockey until he was in his 20s because of barriers like cost and language. We'll hear what he thinks has changed coming up in our next local news at 7:30.
Well, Heather, it wasn't a hockey tournament. It was a curling bonspiel, but I just want to congratulate the folks that were involved in the Ironman curling bonspiel in support of the Heart and Stroke and the charities, the other local charities. It was so much fun on the weekend.
Yeah, and you discovered you actually are talented as a curler.
I had some skills. I think it's because I bowled. I mean, it must be because I bowled, right? The lane, the aim, like there's a lot to it.
Really? I've never seen those two sports tied like that. Really?
Well, when you think about follow through, and when you think about actually what you're doing, when you look down, right?
Wow, illumination.
That's all I got. What do I know? I was hardly great, but I'll tell you what, our team was great. Congrats to CBC. Woo! We did win one of our games. We were quite proud of ourselves. But just, it was so much fun. And the community raised over $17,000 over the weekend, all of the teams. And congratulations to Birds Hillbillies. They're the winner of this year's outdoor bonspiel. So, Yeah, it was fabulous. Have you been down on the river at all for anything like skating or down with
Do you know
kids?
what? I have to confess I have not, but yeah, I need to do that. Lots of people are.
I'm only asking. I hadn't either, and you forget how awesome it is. Like if you're going to celebrate Winnipeg winter, get down at ice level. There were so many people as we were curling on the Red River. It was on the Red Boyne Boat Club on Churchill Drive. So we're on those curling sheets on the Red, but it was so lovely watching everybody go by on the paths. Lots of skaters, lots of people with their dogs, and lots of people with the kids kind of in sleds and winter biking. There was groups of people with the fat tires out. It's just such a wonderful way to enjoy winter.
Are people cross-country skiing as well?
You know, I don't know that I saw a lot of skiers, but it might have just been that they were maybe up on groomed trails and not out on the ice. So, yeah. Anyway, very cool, and congrats to everybody involved. Well, Heather, thank you.
Thank you.
Heather's back at 7:30 with a full newscast. We better switch gears and talk about the fact that you better love winter because it's settling in to stay. Corey's here with our weather forecast.
Yeah, we've already hit our high today of minus 18, and we're actually going to stay there for most of the day here in Winnipeg at the Forks. There is a 30% chance of flurries today. It's going to dip down to minus 29 overnight. And then tomorrow, the high is minus 21, and just kind of take a snapshot of what the weather's going to be tomorrow. It's going to be very similar for the rest of the week. Sunny and hovering around minus 20, minus 21 more or less. So it's going to be at least consistent if you want to peg the weather with something. As for, I'll have more of a regional forecast for you later, but I will let you know that there is an extreme cold warning in effect for much of southwestern Manitoba this morning. That includes Brandon, Killarney, Melita, Verdon, Dauphin, Minnedosa, Riding Mountain. So bundle up. That means frostbite in minutes. It could temperatures over more or less are near minus 30 today, mid minus 20s, but with that wind chill feels more like minus 40. So very, very cold in southwestern Manitoba this morning. As for the commute, looking at the highways, don't see any major issues out there today. And here in the city, on the roads, sidewalks, all looking fairly clear. No major issues either. I will give a shout out to the trails actually along the rivers as well. I was checking out with my toddler. We went on a little toddler hike, and it was lovely, particularly around Wildwood. So worth checking out. If you have any updates for me on trails, anything else you're seeing out there, give me a call, 204-788-3093.
And I should properly shout out our CBC curling team, skipped very well by Nathan Lewicki, as well Jim Agapito, braving the cold to be out with us, Kristen Annabelle, and Catherine Moreau. So we had so much fun out there. Well, speaking of Jim's assignment was another winter assignment last week as well, because we're in the middle of winter now, and the cold temperatures, of course, can be embraced. But the reality is they often will keep us inside, right? Some people use the cold to fuel their winter wonderlands, whether that's making, something outside. Maybe you have made an igloo on a boulevard or an art project inside. You found a way maybe to think creatively to get you through the winter. So our contest is all about that. It's called Show Us Your Winter. We want to know what you do to make the season more bearable, whether it's inside or out. What do you do to make winter more bearable? If you're chosen our winner, CBC's Jim Agapito is going to come down and experience what you do to get through winter. And you could also win, of course, a CBC prize pack. To get us warmed up to the idea, Jim went down to see how some Wolseley residents in Winnipeg were having fun out on the Assiniboine River.
Oh, it's way the ball. Oh, good block. Hi, I'm Sam Yoshida. We're in Wolseley on the Assiniboine River. You can call it a winter wonderland. Yeah, I mean, it kind of evolved over the years, like since COVID. Oh my! Kind of brought, a lot of creation out of people, and yeah, just a bunch of friends coming together and doing stuff. Oh no, I bumped you in. This year we currently have a shuffleboard table made out of ice. We have a curling rink that we use frozen milk jugs to curl with, a little fire pit, some hay bales, and probably close to about 200 Christmas trees that we collected from the neighborhood.
How did you make this ice shuffleboard?
So this is just a form I made out of 2x4 and plywood, and we fill it up with water from the river, let it freeze, and then we kind of glue it together with slush and snow. And yeah, it's a lot of fun. It serves multiple purposes with the shuffleboard and, like just as a bar top. So yeah.
And you guys also have a full curling rink.
Yeah,
How'd
we
you do that?
Yeah. We just clear it, we flooded it, and then we actually paint circles on there and then flood it again.
My name's Mark Dewar and I live across the street. We don't have fancy rocks. We just fill up a milk jug or empty milk jug because we go through like a whole pile of these, and you just fill them with water and food coloring, and then there are your curling rocks, right to the button. When I was a kid, my parents grew up on the Assiniboine River just a little further in St. James, and every year they would do these big rinks and things on the ice, and everybody would haul their Christmas trees down after the after the Christmas was done, and we'd have these big rinks with big trees around them and stuff, and at the end of the year we'd burn them all. Right to the button, right to the button. Oh, he's gonna get us! Oh no! Oh, what we got? What we got? I think a red one.
How many people come?
Well, it's just our kind of group of friends right now. I mean, it's open, like people come by and check it out. A lot of times we're just kind of hanging out here and folks roll by. Oh yeah. And all of the guys that kind of do this, we all have kids, so we come down here and then the adults come and do their curling tournaments in the evening.
Nice shot, Jane.
It's kind of a battle royal between the couples that live in the neighborhood, because we have this milk jug trophy because it's milk jug curling. If you win that, you get to put it in your front yard so that everybody can see it.
It depends on the couples, but it can get pretty competitive. We usually have a tournament at some point through the year.
How many times have you won?
Not enough. It's you, Sam's the guy who's got it hands down.
I've won twice. Yeah.
How does that
about
feel?
4 years. Oh, it feels great. My neighbor across the street has won it, and he's displayed it proudly in his window, so every time I come out the front door, I see it.
Great bragging rights.
Yeah, that's right.
How do you get people to come out when it's maybe a little bit colder?
You make it warm. You have a fire. You do things where you're moving around. You just have a good time.
Let's see how we do this.
It's a meeting point where we can all come down here and have some fun.
It's all luck. We're not very good at this.
I mean, it's open to whoever wants to come in and enjoy it. We leave the milk jugs down here. People come in and just kind of take a look and admire it. And if they want, they can play a game of curling or shuffleboard.
What message do you give to Manitobans in order to enjoy winter more?
I mean, we got to live with it. Might as well have fun doing it. That's the thing. So get out there and do stuff. You can't be shut in all winter long.
So hopefully that's going to inspire you. The video, by the way, to go along with that piece is fantastic. So if you didn't watch on YouTube, check it out later. CBC's Jim Agapito out with Wolseley neighborhood residents on the ice, Mark Dewar and Sam Yoshida. So they were showing us their winter. Why don't you show us yours? No matter how big or small, it could be a big snow fort with its own bobsleigh run. It might just be a cozy reading nook. Maybe that's how you get through winter. So send us a picture or a short video. Show us your winter at win@cbc.ca along with a brief description. That's the only way to enter. Win@cbc.ca. Show us your winter. Everyone who sends something will be entered in the draw. We will enter at the end, we'll do a random draw for that fabulous winter prize pack, and maybe Jim will be coming to visit you. But tune in tomorrow. Jim's going to tour Winnipeg's Ice Igloo while you are entering the contest. It is now 7:21 a.m. It is -19 and going to be around -18 today. And there's a risk of frostbite and extreme cold warning as well for Brandon, Verdun, Dauphin, Minnedosa. So that's what we're looking at. It's going to be really cold all week long. Still ahead on Information Radio this hour and this morning, Working in Chaos, an inside look at working in Health Sciences Center ER.
I had a Sunday morning. It was so frustrating. There was 47 people in the waiting room. We were packed and the other places were empty, and they just kept coming. The ambulances just kept coming.
Stay tuned for part one of a two-part feature interview with a nurse that has worked at HSC for decades. She does use the word chaos to describe what it's like there. And she says that frontline workers need more support, and she's not quite sure why things just aren't improving, although she does acknowledge the multi-layered challenges. So we'll give you a rare inside look at the front line. Stay tuned. Right now, let's turn our attention back to the threat of tariffs from the U.S. President Donald Trump and also the threats of annexation of Canada. Donald Trump spoke to reporters yesterday in Manitoba. His threats of tariffs specifically have spurred a buy local boom for some businesses. Sean Black's founder of Sheepdog Brew Company, as you might have heard on the news, they're an Oak Bluff-based cold brew coffee company. In a few weeks, coffee his coffee is going to be on the shelves in Sobeys all across the country. But in the meantime, Black says he cannot keep up with how in demand his product is. CBC's Felicia Adams spoke with him over the weekend.
We've seen an uptick even the last couple of weeks just in retailers reaching out to us and finding out how to get us into their stores. So I think that starts the trickle-down effect where stores look to carry more Canadian brands. They're doing a better job of advertising which brands are Canadian, and then hopefully the consumers follow that trend and keep buying from Canadian companies.
Tell me about those calls. You said you've been getting calls for the past week.
We're already in about 200 places in Manitoba already, but I think there's about almost 15 stores that contacted us in the last week looking to get us in that have never had us before. Obviously, being so new, it's no pun intended, but it's a grind to get out there and get to lots of stores. And so it's nice when they're reaching out to us and saying, hey, let's get you in, let's get you in. We've had some really small independent shops in small towns out in rural Manitoba, and then we've had a few Sobeys locations. We just got approval a month ago-ish to start selling it to Sobeys and Safeway, so we've already had some of the locations reach out to us to carry us instead of us having to go there and beg them to put our stuff on the shelf, so that's cool.
Do you think that deal or that approval is coming, directly as a result of this buy local sentiment?
No, we were working on that anyway, so it was great timing for us, and hopefully no tariffs come in and we can keep our pricing the same and it doesn't cripple us. But
do you think the other stores calling are a result of that?
I think so. I think they're making an effort to say, okay, which products can we get in right away that we know are Canadian.
How much more product do you think you'll have to, produce to keep up with this demand?
We're forecasting to be at least double the size over this year, so we're ramping up a lot. It feels like a rush. Like we need to ramp up, especially we sell cold coffee in the coldest city because we're crazy, I guess. But we want to ramp up and be ready for summer because we haven't our summer season's just crazy for us.
And tell me about your storefront. Has there been a bigger demand now?
There's been for sure more traffic. I think what's cool about our product is we have people coming and buying cases of it every week because they're like, this is what I drink every day. They bring it to work, they bring it to the job site. And we had a whole bunch more. Like yesterday was a super busy day in the store as well. So I don't know if that's just because the people like our stuff or if that's because of tariff threats and support Canadian, but we've been busier.
Sean Black, owner of Manitoba Cold Brew Coffee Company, Sheepdog Brew Co., talking about how they have been busier and tying that to people thinking about buying Canadian and shopping local, and also a change that happened with where his products are going to be appearing. As mentioned, in a few weeks, his coffee will be on shelves in Sobeys across the country. We're going to hear more on the news. We're also going to hear about the impact on other businesses as well. Right now, it is time for morning sports at 7:26. Khalil Hassanali is in for Scott Regehr. Good morning.
Hey, good morning, Marcy.
What a stinker of a Super Bowl on one side. On the other side, the Philadelphia Eagles exacting some measure of revenge in last night's game, huh?
Definitely, Marcy. So that was probably good for them, not really for the viewers, but it was Patrick Mahomes in Kansas City who beat the city of brotherly love in the big game 2 years ago. This time around, Philadelphia not leaving anything to chance. Their offense could not be stopped, and their defensive game plan spectacular, not giving their opponents any time or space. Philly head coach Nick Sirianni on everyone believing in their process.
This is the ultimate team game. You can't be great without the greatness of others. Great performance by everybody. Offense, defense, special teams, our coaching staff, these great players. We didn't really ever care what anyone thought about how we won or their opinions. All we want to do is win. That's why we listen to My Prerogative a little bit after some wins.
And that's the Bobby Brown version of My Prerogative for
that I had on a little tiny record. Can you believe that? I really did. One of those little records.
Eagles running back Saquon Barkley, like many kids, grew up playing video games, especially football video games. But he says last night getting to hoist the Vince Lombardi trophy for real, just a bit different.
Man, oh man. She looked better in person than it is in Madden. I tell you that, playing as a kid. But it's everything you dream of. I'm just happy to be able to hold it, give it a kiss, and, be world champs. It took 7 years to get here. Some up and down, some injuries. Yeah, year one. And why not? Why not start our dynasty now?
Now, the loss meant Kansas City did not become the first team to three-peat in the Super Bowl era. Patrick Mahomes, though, posted on social media afterwards that he let everyone down, but they're going to be back.
Let's go to the ice and the hockey. In hockey, Jets forward Mark Scheifele is going to find out later today what his next 2 weeks are going to look like.
Yeah, he's the first call officials with Team Canada will make if someone like Sidney Crosby isn't able to play. The Penguins captain has missed the last 2 games because of an injury, and no one's really sure if he'll be part of Canada's final roster selection for the Four Nations Face-Off tournament. Crosby did make the trip to Montreal and is skating sometime this morning, giving coaches and decision makers one last look before they have to finalize their team, which is at 4 o'clock this afternoon. Pittsburgh head coach Mike Sullivan had this to say before their game on Saturday.
We're going to take each day as it comes. He skated for a long time this morning. He felt significantly better today than he did yesterday, and that's really encouraging.
There was no training camp for the tournament, so the team was just announced like that with a news release. But even at the time, people wondered aloud why Scheifele was not picked. He has only made his case stronger since then, showcased by his 31 goals this year, tied for 3rd in the league.
I think you just might have misspoke there for a moment. So we're talking all about Scheifele making the trip, right? Or you said Crosby made the trip?
There.
Oh,
Crosby
sorry.
made the trip to Montreal to practice and possibly get picked for the team.
Then I'm misspeaking and I'm totally Winnipeg-centric and only thinking about Scheifele. All right, big win for a Canadian tennis player before you go, right?
Yeah, Denis Shapovalov played some of his best tennis when it mattered most at the Dallas Open. The 25-year-old dropped 3 of the top 10 players in the world over the last 4 days, and that includes taking down Casper Ruud of Norway in straight sets in yesterday's final. And it almost did not happen for Shapovalov, who was dealing with a knee injury, but now he's actually won 2 tournaments over the last couple months, last one coming in November at the Belgrade Open, Marcy.
All right, Khalil, thank you.
Okay, all the best. Thank you.
That's Khalil Hassanali filling in for Scott Reguer this morning with sports. Still ahead on Information Radio on your morning show today on CBC, a Manitoba man who says he was cut out of his girlfriend's life because he wasn't Pakistani, like her family. That is a relevant thing to share because he's in to talk about a new documentary that delves into interracial relationships. So he's coming up in a full conversation after your CBC Winnipeg News.
This is CBC News. Good morning. I'm Heather Wells in Winnipeg. At 7:30, it's minus 18. That's about as good as it gets for Winnipeg today as we begin a frigid February week in Western Manitoba. It's an extreme cold warning that could last multi-days, according to Environment Canada. Multi-day episode with wind chills in Western Manitoba approaching minus 40. U.S. President Donald Trump says he will unveil new tariffs on all imports of steel and aluminum later today.
Any steel coming into the United States is going to have a 25% tariff.
What about aluminum, sir?
Aluminum, too.
And Trump says Canada will not be exempt. Catherine Cobden is president and CEO of the Canadian Steel Producers Association.
If these tariffs proceed, they will be devastating.
Canada provides 20% of the imported steel in the U.S. As for other tariff threats, a local distillery says they've been getting more national interest in recent weeks. Patent 5 Distillery makes gin and whiskey. When news of tariffs first dropped, co-owner Brock Coots didn't expect an impact to sales, but he says people seem passionate about the buy local movement, even with the tariff threat postponed.
We have lots of new customers coming in as a result of this. Strangely enough, or maybe it's not strange, but we've got a little bit of national attention as a local distiller, and so we've had quite a few orders from out of province.
Coots would still like to see more incentives between provinces to promote interprovincial trade and wants better messaging made available to people on all Canadian producers. You can hear the latest on tariff threats and as well as other national and international news coming up on World Report at 8. A longtime nurse at Manitoba's largest hospital says the healthcare system has been broken for most of her career. The nurse has worked for decades in the emergency room at Winnipeg's Health Sciences Centre. She says frontline healthcare workers sometimes endure pure chaos. CBC has concealed the nurse's voice and identity to protect her job.
There's a person over there who's screaming about, his shoe was lost and he's on meth and he needs some food and he's yelling and screaming. And then there's a little tiny old lady over here who has a fever and she has cancer. So she's like a C-test too, needs to go in. And it's just the craziness of everything that's going on. It's hard to describe.
On Friday, Premier Wapkanu said in order for the province to fix health care, it needs more people on the front lines. He says there are 1,255 more healthcare staff working now in Manitoba than last April, and more security staff, he says, will be added across the system. You can hear more on this story from the nurse from the HSC ER coming up in the next half hour right here on Information Radio. A University of Manitoba student is turning his grief into action and wants to make more safe spaces for men to talk about their mental health. Vebo Varma's brother Yash died by suicide in 2023. He was 16 years old. While his death was devastating, Varma says it also motivated him to help others. One of the ways he's doing that is by creating a men's wellness club at the University of Manitoba.
I realized that if my brother was struggling and no one knew about it, I was struggling in my own way after my brother's death. There are plenty of other students who are in the same boat or are simply looking for someone to chat with.
Varma's Men's Wellness Circle UM recently had its first event called Wings and Wellness. Well, breaking barriers. The third annual Lunar New Year hockey tournament celebrating Asian culture, Ray Kamfu played goal for the team Whitesnake. He says growing up in a small Alberta town, he didn't get to play hockey until he was in his 20s.
There was no outreach. There was a lot of barriers. There was just no ability for anybody who didn't know how to get into hockey to get into hockey. My parents were both immigrants during the Vietnam War, and English was a barrier. Finances was a barrier, and just knowledge of the sport was a barrier.
Now, Kamfu says his young son plays hockey. This weekend's 4-day event was hosted by the Winnipeg Emperors Hockey Club. And a new Super Bowl champ.
For the second time, the Vince Lombardi Trophy is headed to Philadelphia. Eagles flag in Super Bowl 59.
The final call last night in New Orleans as the Philadelphia Eagles defeated Kansas City in this year's title game, 40-22, the final. Kansas City was looking for their third straight Super Bowl win, but they were dominated by Philadelphia. The Eagles were up 24-0 by halftime and never looked back. You can find more news updated throughout the day. All you have to do is head to cbc.ca/Manitoba.
How many times can you sack someone?
I know.
Like, what was that game?
A little painful, right?
Wow. Yeah, it was a little painful. Not if you were a Philly fan, obviously.
Yeah. And Travis Kelce, they had a shot of him coming off the field right before halftime. He looked like he'd been crying.
Yeah. Well, some of them, yeah. Well, maybe they were.
Yeah.
I don't know. All right. Thank you, Heather.
You're welcome.
Yeah, it was, I don't know where their heads were yesterday. It was just stunning. All right, let's get into what's going on in the regional forecast now. It's going to be really cold today and for the week. Corey Funk's in with that and traffic.
Yeah, we are right now in Winnipeg at -18. That's where we're going to stay for the most of the day today. 30% chance of flurries here in Winnipeg. Going to dip down to -29 overnight, though, and then warm up to -21. Warm up to -21 tomorrow to stay mainly sunny. That's what the rest of the week's going to look like here in Winnipeg. Elsewhere, though, it's much, much colder. Let's look to western Manitoba right now. There is an extreme cold warning in effect right now for Brandon, Killarney, Melita, Verdun, Dauphin, Minnedosa, Riding Mountain, that whole surrounding area. Mostly because of the wind chills today. It's you're looking in the high -20s, but with the wind chills feels closer to -40 for you, and that's actually going to be pretty much the case for much of the week, says Environment Canada. So bundle up in western Manitoba. It is 27 right now, -27 right now in Brandon. High today -23. Dauphin -25 right now. You're heading for -20 today. And Thompson, you're -26. You're looking for a high of -21. 30% chance of some snow for you. But in Winnipeg right now, we're at -18. As for your commute, very quiet on the commuter line today. Haven't heard of any major issues. Highways are looking all right too. Sidewalks are nice and clear. So overall, looks like a fairly good commute. But I always have a theory that there's always at least one stalled car in Winnipeg at any given time from about December till March. So if you see that car, give me a call on the CBC commuter line. That number 204-788-3092. 3.
All right, thanks, Corey.
Thank you.
It is 7:37 a.m. on 89.3 FM, 990 a.m. on the app and YouTube. I'm Marcy Marcusa with CBC. And next on the show, it is a path to love that we're going to be talking about. But this particular path is specific and not easy. The path to love can always be a challenge, but particularly challenging if you're in a mixed race relationship. At least that's what the couples in a new Manitoba-made documentary had to say. Relationship Remix follows the bumpy path of 3 couples navigating the choppy waters of marrying outside your culture. Have a listen to the clip.
And
German and Scottish.
German and Scottish.
He's going to age so much better than me.
I'm Chris Sharp, and I've been in an interracial marriage for over 18 years. And mixing cultures hasn't been easy.
They completely said, no, you guys cannot date.
I don't know how many times they made us break up. They moved her away to Ottawa.
Relationships like mine are seeming more and more common. But is it always this difficult?
When we met, we really didn't think about the cultural differences. I just fell in love with her as the person. But then came all the other stuff that I wasn't expecting.
So that's just a taste, a clip of Relationship Remix. It is, as I mentioned, a new documentary that streams free on CBC Gem starting on Friday, Valentine's Day. But tonight, there's a special screening and Q&A at Dave Barber Cinematheque if you want to check that out in the Exchange. Chris Sharp is in studio now, though, film's producer. You heard him in the clip there. He also appears in the film because he's navigated his own mixed-race relationship and now marriage of long time. Good morning.
Good morning. How you doing, Marcy?
I'm doing well. How are you doing?
I'm doing good. A little chilly, but it's all good.
No doubt. So tell me a little bit about what Relationship Remix is about and where you saw sort of the need to have these conversations come forward in this way.
Yeah, it's a deep dive into mixed relationships, the good and the bad. And it's coming from, like, I'm kind of navigating the narrative as the host, taking you on a journey to discover is life just as hard to date other races as it was for me? So my relationship wasn't very easy to actually make happen.
Tell me a little bit about that then, your own relationship, because I know you're Jamaican Canadian. Your wife Sonia is Pakistani Canadian, I understand. What were the challenges back in the day and how's it, evolved?
Well, it was pretty simple. I mean, I met her in Portage Place back in the days when there used to be sand and also, Athlete's World, and we just started talking, and she gave me her number. And then the minute she gave me her number, I called her. And then her brother and her parents said, don't call here ever again. So that was just the start of it. And at that point, we realized we weren't allowed to date, so we just decided to be friends. But it was really difficult to be friends. So we just kept falling in love, and they kept making us break up over and over and over again. And you'll see a lot of that in the documentary of, like, how much pushback we got from the in-laws, but we still made it work.
What was it like for you? I understand pretty cathartic to actually, years later, you actually kind of bring it up with your in-laws really directly. Like, why were you sort of not in favor of me?
Yeah, it was actually the first time I ever asked them that question in the documentary. So it was very nerve-wracking and a very, very powerful moment. But it was just a cultural thing. It was just they were just basically looking out for her. And I think, in the Pakistani and in Indian culture, there's, a lot of the parents are really involved in, like, arranging the marriage.
What kinds of cultural similarities end up being explored in this as well? Because you're talking about the challenges, but also the joys of interracial, marriages and couples.
Yeah, like there's a lot of different, I guess you could say, like food, a lot of spicy foods, just the way, that we raise our kids, lots of, discipline and whatnot. There was actually a lot of similarities. So race shouldn't have been a factor, but it definitely was. Just there was a lot of stereotypes in regards to being black. And I guess the parents just needed time to kind of get over those.
How did you incorporate original music into your documentary?
Yeah, it was really awesome. So we got music producers from across Canada, and we took each cultures, mixed them together. The couples got a chance to actually, give the title and get involved and add elements from their cultures, and we just made original music based upon their cultures.
Well, you've been with your wife for now, I think 18 years, right? Like nearly 20 years?
Yes.
So do you have advice now for other people that are starting their own relationships and they might happen to be mixed race relationships? Or what have you learned that is valuable to share? Because advice is a big loaded word, right? It feels like a lot of pressure, but what would you share that you think, maybe you wish you had known at the beginning?
I would say to do a little bit of research on the culture and make sure that you're, respecting, because each culture has a little bit of a different way of doing things. So if you do a little bit of research when you're going to date somebody from a different culture, it will go a long way at the end of the day.
How much have we evolved in Winnipeg? It's just interesting because you and I sound like we're about the same age when you're talking about Portage Place and those stores, and I'm like, oh, yeah, okay. And you would never have made a documentary like this, I don't think, as freely back in the day in Winnipeg.
No, mixed race couples is, as most people can see, is one of the fastest growing, couple combination in the world right now. Things have changed. Right now, it's probably a perfect time to start talking about this just because, the way the world is. I think that this documentary will definitely break down boundaries and start conversations and really open the drapes and let people see like what these relationships are like, and it will help a lot of people that may think they're alone out there.
And it's just so interesting that you got couples to even agree to do it because it's so personal. And then the layers of you add the parents on both sides, like you said, the families on both sides. It's hard to come forward and talk about things that are like really real to everybody, and families all experience things in different ways. So how did you find the other couples? I'm just super curious that said, yeah, we're going to open up about this. We feel like this is important.
There were lots of couples that wanted to participate. We had people reaching out from the States, Europe, all over the world, actually. Seemed like people wanted to talk. Seemed like people wanted to tell their stories. I think a lot of people, and you'll see in the doc, some people thought they were alone. And but this conversation, I believe this is one of the first documentaries in the world that really kind of dives deep into it. So
tonight, you'll be taking questions from people, Q&A at Dave Barber, right?
A little bit of questions.
Yeah. And then the screening. How are you feeling about it?
This will be one of the first times I'm going to sit in the back where I get to see like people's reactions to a doc that I've produced. So it's really exciting.
Yeah, congrats on it, and good luck the rest of the way as it is going to launch as well. We mentioned on GEM. Thanks for coming in this morning.
Oh, thank you very much.
That is Chris Sharp, one of the producers of the new documentary Relationship Remix. So the film does stream free starting on Friday, Valentine's Day on CBC GEM. But we've been referring to tonight, 7 o'clock, right? There's a special screening and then a little bit of Q&A at Dave Barber Cinematheque in the Exchange. If you want more information, go to relationshipremix.eventbrite.ca.
New on CBC GEM this February. 3 inspiring films that celebrate Black history. Summer of Soul unearths never-before-seen footage of the Harlem Cultural Festival in 1969. Featuring music's greatest artists. Invisible Beauty profiles fashion icon Beth Ann Hardison and her lasting impact. And Queen of Glory takes us on an intimate journey of the Ghanaian immigrant experience. Watch them all for free, starting February 1st on CBC GEM.
Time right now is 7:45 on 89.3 FM, 990 AM on the app or YouTube. I'm Marcy Marcusa. You are with CBC this morning. 89.3 as mentioned. Minus 19 in Winnipeg. I'm just going to see if that's changed at all. It's just frigid out there. When you look at our YouTube shot, everything just looks like it's just icy. It's a kind of temperature where you're hoping the cameras don't stop working. It's so cold. We are still, we've gained a degree. We're minus 18 now, but just to give you some context, that's the warm spot in the province, minus 18. But for the day, we're not going to change at all. That's where we're staying. With wind chill, it feels like minus 30. And we also have a warning to tell you about, so an extreme cold warning to the west. This is Brandon, Killarney, Melita, Verdon, Minnedosa, and Dauphin. In Dauphin, frostbite in minutes on exposed skin. So certainly take care and pay attention to the forecast today if you're heading out. Well, up next on CBC, the Health Sciences Centre is Manitoba's largest healthcare facility, and it has been a pretty extraordinary year for its emergency department. A man died in the ER while waiting for care in January. A code orange was called during a blizzard that same month. And now a nurse who has worked in the ER at HSC for decades is speaking out about the challenges that healthcare workers face there. She says most days it's, quote, chaos. And she points to the 2018 closure of 3 ERs in the city as one of the biggest issues. Though she believes our system has been broken, she said, for most of her career. I spoke with her for over an hour recently. CBC News has concealed her identity to safeguard her job. Today's 2-part interview gives us access into one of Manitoba's busiest emergency rooms in the province's largest healthcare facility. And it might help us understand more about what frontline workers experience and what needs to change. Here now is part one. So when the waiting room itself is busy, and this is where I think a lot of Manitobans kind of, that's the entry point, right? Everybody can imagine what that looks like. But what's the actual system for how people are checked while they are waiting? Like what are those positions like in an average shift at HSCER?
So we have 4 triage nurses. We have 1 nurse that's assigned to what's called offload. And we have what's called a community services worker. She or he is probably the eyes and ears of the waiting room. If they're concerned about somebody, they come to us. I mean, we work really closely with them, trying to figure out, what's going on with all the people that are waiting. But those are the people that talk to them every 5 minutes or hour or half an hour, the ones that people come to for help. They'll come to them and then they'll come and say, hey, can you come and see this patient? I'm kind of worried about them, or bring them up to the desk or whatever.
What would lead to someone getting missed on a busy night when there's lots of people there?
Just chaos, right? Like, I mean, I don't know, 2 people could be fighting over there. I mean, we have quite a few security guards in the waiting room, but people get angry at each other and the patients themselves are fighting amongst. Just in a bad day with lots of things happening, that seems to be when the worst of the chaos happens. And the reality is, at bad times, there could be 60 people out there. And well, that's just in the waiting room part, and then maybe 12 or 15 down the ambulance hallway.
So I want to ask you about, I know you weren't there that shift, but the night that the man died in the HSCER, what is that like for you?
It's, I guess we talk about it like we're lucky that it doesn't happen every day, because it's chaos, it's craziness. There's people that are in our department and they step outside and they use drugs and they come back and they're not breathing. I bet you once a shift I'm pulling somebody out of the waiting room to give them Narcan because they're not breathing anymore because of the drugs they took. It's very grating on your soul. It's difficult to watch. It's difficult to be part of. I don't know how else to describe it.
We don't, I should be clear just so people listening and viewing this, or obviously it's under investigation and we don't have details about what happened specifically in that case. But given the environment and you saying that you're lucky that you don't have some kind of a death once a day is really, that's sobering.
Yeah, I mean, when I think about the person who lost his life and, the one that happened all those years ago as well, that was in 2008.
Brian Sinclair, yes.
It's a broken system, and it's been broken for the majority of my nursing career, which is unfortunate. I'm not sure that there's a quick fix to healthcare.
When you agreed to speak with us, you said you want to be a strong voice for your work family, that you're really drowning, and that you need help. What questions should we be asking people in power that are making the decisions to improve our healthcare system right now?
I'd like to know what the plan is. I mean, they tell us that they're hiring more staff and opening more spaces, and I mean, they opened a contingency ward the other day when I think we had 43 admitted patients, and in 6 hours that ward was full. And we're still in the same situation as we were 6 hours ago. There's still no beds for these people that are in our department. And it's like every day they admit X number of patients, but they're not discharging that same number. So it doesn't equal. The admissions is far outweighing the discharges.
And what about people who are experiencing, like have come in with a stroke? Because I know you were sharing that can be a particular challenge.
A lot of people that have strokes, they're maybe subacute strokes or they're smaller. Their functioning level is less, so they can't go home, but they're not sick enough to be admitted to HSC. So they get flagged as the low acuity, the alternate level of care, and they sit and emerge sometimes up to 12 days, even longer, waiting for a site or a bed at the low acuity site.
How much of an issue is that then? Because I think the average person thinks, well, if you have a stroke, but it's, lower issue and someone's stabilized, move them on. But you're saying there's nowhere to move them on to, so they're stuck. So part of this is that the emergency department is now
a holding zone. Personal care home, it feels like some days.
What's the longest length of stay in recent memory you've had somebody that was in a bed like that, recovering from stroke?
We had 310 hours the other day. That's probably the longest I remember in the last month. 310 hours in emerge.
A patient was there for that long. What prevents someone from going up to a ward?
It's full everywhere in the province.
Where is it empty? Because some of the wards, I understand, they're actually shuttered because there's no people?
There's no staff. There are some wings in the hospital that are unoccupied because there is not enough staff.
I know that you weren't there the night that the man had died in the waiting room at the ER, but you were there recently on shift during the recent blizzard and the code orange that was called. What was that like?
Magical. I mean, thankfully we didn't receive any patients that day, but it was so, I don't know what the word is. I was so inspired by the teamwork that I saw, by the people that were coming and taking the patients, and we had so many social workers and transport, like everybody just came to help. We emptied out our department so we could take the new patients that may or may not be coming, and that day we never received any patients from any of the accidents that had occurred. Thankfully, nobody was seriously injured enough to come to us.
So something happened to clear out the ER that day. Obviously, it was a very specific thing, a code orange, but something worked.
Yeah, it was magical. I don't know. I mean, watching it, it was just like, wow, I'm impressed. Now, can we do this every day? Can we call a code orange every morning? I think it would lose its magic if that happened.
Where did all the people go, though?
I don't know. It was just, some were discharged from our department, the people that were safe to discharge, but they just pulled them up. And I don't know if they pulled them in beds that were closed because they didn't have staff for those beds or what had happened, but it was like, wow, where did everybody go?
Did they come back after them, some of the patients?
None of them. We didn't get any of those patients from the accidents, and the ones that moved out of our department, they stayed out. They never came back.
That's a longtime nurse who works in HSC's emergency department. CBC News is concealing her identity to safeguard her job. Now, regarding Code Orange, CBC will be exploring more details of what does happen in those situations in the days ahead on the program. Tomorrow, I believe we have an interview lined up to try to understand that. After 8, though, part 2 of our feature interview, where we're hear just how often the ER is used as a shelter by people experiencing homelessness. This nurse is also going to share with us what was happening on one of her worst days on the job, with details that, frankly, I found very shocking. So stay tuned. That interview is coming up in the next half hour of the show as we try and understand how to do better for frontline workers in the province. Stay tuned. It is now 4 minutes to 8 o'clock. I'm Marcy Marcusa. Thank you for joining us here on CBC. We are live downtown here in Winnipeg. I hope you had a great weekend. It's going to be really cold all week long. We launched our Show Us Your Winter contest this morning. So we want videos and pictures to win at cbc.ca. We want to see how you make the most of it, whether it's something you do indoors, maybe you're reading, making art, who knows, or if you're just doing the outside thing, bundling up and enjoying it no matter what. So show us your winter. Win at cbc.ca. That series will continue tomorrow. We've got some great CBC swag involved. A chance for you to win. Well, I want to share a couple comments before the news because World Report's about to happen here. And we've been hearing this morning about the U.S. threat of steel and aluminum tariffs. So we'll see what happens with that. But we're asked you this morning, the Prime Minister has now said Trump's comments about making Canada the 51st state are a real thing, quote unquote. We're asking how you're processing that. So Kim Pops says, very disturbing. It causes me a lot of anxiety by Canadian. Kev Roberts says it's about time we took threats to our sovereignty seriously. Kathy Harness says it does need to be taken seriously and we need to be prepared as a nation to do whatever we can to resist. And personally, it really affects me on an emotional level. So a lot of you are wanting to share this morning. There's a number of comments, tens of, I think there's about 50 now on my Facebook page. If you want to call this morning too, we'll take calls, 788-3205. Here's Heather now with our headlines.
Good morning. Well, some Winnipeg businesses are seeing greater demand for their products as the calls to buy local grow louder. Local distillery Patent 5 makes gin and whiskey. Co-owner Brock Coots says they've had lots of new customers coming in ever since the threatened tariffs. And he says they've had quite a few out-of-province orders. Coots would like to see more incentives between provinces to promote interprovincial trade. And a new student-run mental health club for men has launched at the University of Manitoba. Varma Men's Wellness Circle UM recently had its first event. One student says men still face stigma when it comes to showing emotion. I'll be back with more Manitoba news coming up at 8:30.
Thanks, Heather.
You're welcome.
Minus 19 in Winnipeg, and we'll be around minus 18 for the day with wind chill around minus 30 is what it'll feel like. An extreme cold warning for the west, including Dauphin and Brandon, and in Dauphin, frostbite in minutes. On the morning commute, things have been good so far. If you spot any problems, so please give us a call. Corey will pick it up and we'll get you on the air if we want to pass it along, if it's necessary, of course. 788-3093, 788-3093 is where you reach us on the commuter line. Well, coming up after 8, we continue part 2 of that interview with the ER nurse who works at HSC. She says they have some people who are living houseless who are there so frequently that she's gotten to calling them regulars. She says nurses even make gifts for them over the holidays. The thing is, they aren't actually there in need of emergency care. What does she think is the solution to that particular aspect of one of the challenges in the ER? Stay with us.
queue. Don't go to the pub tonight, please. Stay in and give us the money. There are people dying now.
I'm Jill Deacon, sitting in for Tom Power. The new Live Aid musical, Just for One Day, has opened in Toronto. The organizer, Bob Geldof, drops by the Q studio to talk about the production and his memories of the iconic concert back in 1985.
Q, this morning at 10:30 in Newfoundland, and on the CBC Listen app, or wherever you get your podcasts. The CBC News is next. Coming up in half an hour, it's The Current with Matt Galloway.
Canadian doctors should be prescribing exercise to their patients, particularly older ones, says a new study. We will hear from people over 80 about what working out does for them and why it's fun, not just torture. It's coming up on The Current.
This is World Report. Good morning. I'm Marcia Young. U.S. President Donald Trump is threatening more new tariffs, this time on steel and aluminum. Trump says he will make the formal announcement today. It could have a major impact on Canada's industries and workers. The CBC's Cameron McIntosh joins me now from Washington. Cameron, what is the latest on this new tariff threat?
Well, good morning. Yes, this is a big deal for Canada. We're the largest supplier of both steel and aluminum to the U.S. The president made the comments about the tariffs out of the blue while talking to reporters on Air Force One.
Monday, yeah, tomorrow.
What countries will those go on?
Everybody. Steel.
Including Canada and Mexico?
Yeah. Any steel coming into the United States is going to have a 25% tariff.
What about aluminum, sir?
Aluminum, too.
Now, Trump has done this before. In his first term, he levied tariffs on all foreign steel and aluminum. Canada ultimately got those rolled back. Now, analysts say tariffs would drive up U.S. prices, but in the long term could help steel producers in the States. One of the largest U.S. steel has been struggling. Trump says he'll also announce new reciprocal tariffs on countries that impose tariffs on U.S. products later this week.
And Cameron, what is Trump saying now about his threat to annex Canada?
He's not backing off on it, not at all. Again, it came up while he spoke to reporters, saying it would be a beautiful thing to remove the, quote, artificial line that makes up the border. Now, Trump's national security advisor, Mike Waltz, also spoke about it on NBC's Meet the Press Sunday, saying Canadians are sick of liberal governance.
I think the Canadian people many of them would love to join the United States. I have all kinds of neighbors down in Florida that are Canadians that are escaping many of the liberal policies and have moved in.
Trump has said Canada is not a viable country, that he'd like to annex it using economic force. Last week, the Prime Minister was quoted saying he believes Trump is serious while flat out rejecting the notion.
Thank you, Cam.
You're welcome.
The CBC's Cameron McIntosh in Washington. Canada's ambassador to France says the U.S. may be breaking international law by threatening other countries. Stéphane Dion made the suggestion to reporters in Paris. Olivia Stefanovich brings us that story.
If Canada is not a viable country, show me a viable country.
At the Canadian Embassy in Paris, Ambassador Stéphane Dion fielded questions dominated by U.S. President Donald Trump's escalating threats towards Canada and neighboring Greenland.
You know that according to international law, it's not only to invade a neighbor that is against international law and the Charter of the UN, it is to threaten. So we are against that, of course.
Dion wouldn't say whether the United Nations should launch an investigation into the U.S., but he made a point of re-emphasizing his suggestion for others to ponder.
The international law said you don't threaten your neighbors.
Trump claimed Canada is not a viable country without U.S. trade and warned it can no longer depend on Washington for military protection, all of which Dion dismissed, saying if you don't defend Canada, you can't defend the U.S. Olivia Stefanovich, CBC News, Paris.
The Trump administration has given U.S. federal workers until the end of the day to voluntarily leave their jobs. If they quit now, they will be paid through September, part of an effort to reduce the size of the U.S. government. But it is still not clear whether the offer is legal. The program was temporarily paused last week. Unions filed a lawsuit calling the deal unlawful. A federal judge will hear arguments today. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau is warning world leaders about the impact and speed of artificial intelligence. Trudeau is attending an AI summit in Paris today. He says world leaders need to be prepared for how quickly AI is changing the world.
If we have a delay in terms of AI adoption around the world, the consequences will be even more catastrophic and more painful, not just for those who don't have access to it, but for the divisions and the conflicts that will result.
Trudeau says this year developing clean and reliable energy to power AI will be a G7 priority. New Zealand says it has been blindsided by a deal between the Cook Islands and China. They're poised to sign a new strategic partnership this week, but New Zealand officials say they were not informed of the deal. They call the lack of transparency a significant concern. The Cook Islands and New Zealand are supposed to consult each other on matters of defense and security. New Brunswick has the highest rate of child sexual assault cases in this country. The latest crime data from Statistics Canada highlights the problem. As Savannah Odd reports, advocates say the province can do more to prevent the crime and address its lifelong effects.
We live in a province where there have been a lot of history of sexual abuse.
Marie-Andrée Pellon has been studying the issue of child sexual assault in New Brunswick for years. The University of Moncton criminologist even sat on an advisory panel for the province back in 2019.
The report showed that we didn't have some kind of services that was specially trained to help those children.
Pellon says the province has made progress in supporting victims, but the problem has persisted. In 2023, New Brunswick had the highest rate of police-reported sexual assaults of any province for victims under 12 years old, and also between the ages of 12 and 17.
Child sexual abuse is it's more serious than we thought.
Sylvie Leblanc is a social worker and co-director at the Kent Violence Prevention Centre, north of Moncton. She works with youth victims and says sexual assaults on children can have severe long-term consequences, impacts on physical and mental health, and a risk of violence in future relationships.
Sometimes the myth that we have when it comes to children is because they're so young and they don't really understand what's happening, so it doesn't have as much of an impact. But it's really the opposite.
Experts say better sex education and resources for those at risk of offending are key to prevention. Savannah Odd, CBC News, Fredericton.
Air Canada admits it canceled return tickets for a handful of its passengers in recent years, and they were forced to pay up a second time to get home. The airline says it had no record of the travelers' outbound flight. It calls it a rare technological malfunction, but others call it a safety concern. Erica Johnson has this Go Public investigation.
She was completely bewildered.
Ailey Lim is talking about her aunt, Siokar Lim, who found herself stranded in Budapest last November after Air Canada cancelled her flight home to Montreal. The airline claimed Lim was a no-show on an earlier flight, so cancelled her ticket. Lim, though, wasn't a no-show and had to pay $2,600 to buy a new ticket home. To prove she had flown from Munich to Berlin, Lim had her boarding pass, receipts, and photos standing in front of Berlin landmarks. When she asked for compensation, Air Canada refused. Lim doesn't speak English, so her niece, Ailey Lim, helps tell her story.
I think she felt a little bit gaslit, if I can call it that, because she obviously took the flight.
Go Public has heard from 5 other people, all forced to pay again for tickets home after Air Canada incorrectly deemed them no-shows and cancelled their flights. Not just frustrating and costly, says an expert on airplane passenger boarding methods. John Milne says not knowing how many passengers are on a plane is also a safety concern. He points to the recent crash of an American Airlines plane in Washington.
You're searching for a certain number of people, and maybe you stop too early. Somebody that maybe could have been saved isn't, because you weren't looking for that many people.
Air Canada says these cases were rare, caused by a human error or technological malfunction, but that safety was in no way compromised. He said customers will be contacted for an apology, and so the airline can rectify the situation. Erica Johnson, CBC News, Vancouver.
Bryan Adams is on tour in Australia, but it's not going as planned.
You got to roll the punches, take it on the chin.
His show in Perth was cancelled last night. There was a sewage problem. An enormous fatberg caused wastewater to overflow near the arena where Adams was supposed to perform, and authorities were worried the venue's toilets could back up, so they called off the show. But the Canadian rocker is going to, as the song says, roll with the punches. He has shows in Sydney, Brisbane, and Melbourne later this week.
Stand up for what you think is right.
That is the latest from World Report. If you are trying to make staying informed a daily habit, you can follow World Report wherever you get your podcasts. I'm Marcia Young.
That's what you got to do. That's what I said to you.
Good morning, Manitoba. I'm Marcy Marcusa. This is Information Radio. We're live in downtown Winnipeg on CBC 89.3 FM, 990 AM on the app and YouTube. Cold this morning in Winnipeg, going to be frigid all week. We'll get into the forecast with Corey in a moment here. And then part 2 of a feature interview this morning. If you were with us before 8 o'clock, you heard part of our conversation with a nurse at HSC. She's worked in the emergency department and in other areas of the hospital for decades. She's giving us a rare look inside Manitoba's largest healthcare facility, and the ER specifically. This half hour, what were her worst days on the job? What was going on around her? What's her call to action for improvement in the healthcare system? Where does she see solutions? And we hear about the houseless population going to ERs for shelter. So how often does that happen? Her answer might surprise you. So stay tuned for that interview, which there's so much value in it. I know we often as journalists analyze, the system, the numbers. We look at how many people are needed in the system to improve things. But when you look at the experiences of the frontline workers who are already working in the system, it really tells you something else about what's happening. So stay tuned. We'll have part 2 in a moment. Right now, Heather Wells is in with other news stories and headlines from our news center live this morning. Good morning.
Good morning. Some Winnipeg businesses are seeing greater demand for their products as call to buy local grows louder. Sean Black owns and operates Sheepdog Brew, specializing in cold brew coffee. He has recently signed a deal with Sobeys and Safeway, placing his product in stores right across the province. We're going to hear from him coming up. As well, a hockey tournament to break barriers. The 3rd annual Lunar New Year hockey tournament was on over the weekend, celebrating Asian culture. We'll hear from one player and the barriers he faced getting into hockey as a child. I'll be back with more Manitoba news coming up at 8:30.
Thank you, Heather.
You're welcome.
Corey Funk is, you're doing triple duty. Corey's directing, covering the commute, covering weather. Where do you want to start?
Well, let's start with weather here. -19 here at the Forks, here in Winnipeg at the Forks. We are warming up 1 degree to -18 today. 30% chance of flurries for us here in the city. Going to dip down to -29 overnight, and then it's going to warm up to a still frigid -21 tomorrow, mainly sunny. And pretty much what the weather is going to be tomorrow, it's going to be very similar for the rest of the week, sunny and cold, according to Environment Canada. As you move west, though, do bear in mind that you are under an extreme cold warning for areas around Brandon, Killarney, Melita, Vernon, Dauphin, Minnedosa. We're talking temperatures right now in the high -20s, but with that wind chill, it feels closer to -40. So frostbite in minutes, bundle up, and that may very well be the case for you for much of the week. But right now in Winnipeg, we are sitting at -19. As for the commute, really, it's been a very quiet commute overall, but there's one thing you may want to keep an eye out for. If traffic is slow on northbound Pembina around Point Road or so, that's because there was recently a multi-vehicle collision there that has been cleared, but there's still some delays kind of from that, so just heads up. Otherwise, it's haven't heard of any issues on the highways. Sidewalks were pretty clear on my way in this morning. If you have any updates for me, good or bad, about the roads, trails, sidewalks, highways, give me a call, 204-788-3093.
Well, let's begin with a quote from a nurse who, as mentioned, has worked for decades in the Health Sciences Centre Emergency Department and is the subject of a feature interview on today's show. Quote, she shared with us, "We're the province's hospital," she said, "and it's really sad what's going on in our department. The length of stay, the wait that it takes to see a doctor, it's not great. It needs to be better. We need to do better, and I don't know how to do that. We need help from the people above us, the decision makers. Something needs to change for us to do our jobs properly." End quote. That is why this nurse is speaking out candidly about some of the realities she faces in the hospital. As we've been mentioning, I spoke with her recently for over an hour. CBC News has concealed her identity to safeguard her job. Here now is part 2 of our discussion. What was one of your worst days on your job?
I don't know. Maybe I remember a Wednesday in November. I was at triage. I think there was only 3 of us. Usually there's 4, sometimes there's 5. We were short-staffed. It was full. And it's just difficult when there's lots of misbehaving in the waiting room and people, whether they're drinking in the waiting room or doing drugs in the bathroom in the waiting room, or it was just chaos. It was just the whole shift. I don't think the 3 of us, I don't think any of us had a break that night at the triage desk. We never left. It was 12 solid hours of chaos.
Is it silly that I'm surprised that people would be drinking in the waiting room and doing drugs in the bathroom, that you're having to deal with that? Is that unusual?
No, not for us. I mean, that sounds horrible, but it's a daily occurrence, probably. The drugs and alcohol, that's huge for us. It really is. I mean, there's a couple patients that when I watch them walk through the door, I say to security, put the hand sanitizer behind the desk, please. Because I know that if it isn't, they're going to take it. Like, that sounds horrible too, but drinking, drugs, addictions.
They're drinking the sanitizer. That's why you're saying that, yeah.
Yeah, well, so, you triage somebody that maybe is intoxicated, and then at triage you decide to do blood work, and then 3 hours later you find the person in the corner sleeping, very strong sleeping, and then you do more blood work and the alcohol level is double what it was when they came in. And I don't know, we're a safe space, right? It's frustrating, but it's all they have. And
what do you need? We're talking about systems and departments and governments and, solutions and problems, but what do you need?
If we could have 5 more nurses every shift, if we could even have our baseline every shift, most shifts were supposed to be charging 25. Most shifts were not there. 21, 22. But if we could have 25 or 28 every day, that'd be really nice. And if we could have an infinite number of unit assistants to help, they're amazing people too, but it's just, there's so many people and so many people need so much stuff, help, whether, toileting or changing the linens or more hands make less work. That's one of my mottos. More hands make less work. It's exhausting. I don't know. I had a Sunday morning. It was so frustrating. There was 47 people in the waiting room, and the other sites had, I think St. B had 3 and the Grace had 7 or something like that. And we had 47 people in our waiting room, and a young man hung himself in the bathroom, and the housekeeper found him, and nobody ever knew about it because he didn't die. We resuscitated him, we intubated him, he went to ICU, and he ended up fine a couple days later, got extubated, went home with his family. But nobody heard about that because he didn't die. I suppose had he died, it would have made news. But I was so, frustrated that morning because we were packed and the other places were empty and they just kept coming. The ambulances just kept coming. And it was like, could you take someone somewhere else? Like, it's so frustrating, but I don't blame the paramedics. They're angels too. Their job is to get people to the care that they need. And unfortunately, I think all roads lead to HSC.
How often are you seeing people in the ER that are there because they're experiencing homelessness?
More so at the night shift. I think there's more places during the day that people can stay warm.
But every shift?
Every shift. Every shift.
How many people?
10, 15. Same people every night.
You know them?
I know them. I know their names. I know their birthdays. Some of them I know their personal health information number off by heart because that's how many times I've seen them.
So now you are a shelter worker, an ER nurse, a person who's involved in, as you put it, a holding area for those that should be in care homes, maybe.
I'm a lot of things. We all are in Emerge. Once they get triaged, a doctor has to see them, or they have to be medically cleared to go to those warm-up shelters. We can't just send them there from triage. Even if we know that they're just there because it's cold, we still have to have them seen by a physician to say that they're stable to go to that shelter because they presented to us. They didn't just go to the shelter. And I'm not sure how to get the word out that there's shelters that they could go to. They don't have to come to Emerge, but it's just habit for them, I think. And they're safe, and we feed them, and we're kind.
Who's most commonly sitting out there? Like, what's the ratio? Are you going to have half the waiting room full of people who are unhoused and the other half who are having maybe more, for lack of a better term, traditional medical emergency physically? Or is that way off? You know what I mean, that ratio? Is it?
Sometimes it's like half, sometimes it's like 3/4 of the unhoused and
That much?
Yeah. Some nights there's 30 people at 3 o'clock in the morning, 30 people in the waiting room, and 4 of them actually have medical problems. And the rest are just there because it's cold.
And when did that number start to shift like that? Because that wouldn't have been.
It differs every day, so it's not really like a set number.
Yeah, I get
I mean,
that.
it's an average. Sometimes we look and go, oh, we don't have any patients. They're all just here for shelter now. We got everybody else in. It just depends on the night and how busy it is and what's going on within the rest of the department. But
Got it.
at triage, sometimes all of the people that are left in the waiting room are seeking shelter, seeking warmth, seeking food. I mean, not that we're not here to help the unhoused, but there's a whole group of people that are paid to do that, the shelter people, the people that are at the warm-up places. If you don't have a medical problem, you shouldn't be in an emergency room. I mean, mental health crisis definitely counts as a medical problem. A drug addiction counts as a medical problem. But if it's cold outside and you don't have anywhere to go, that isn't an emergency. That needs to go to a shelter, not an emergency room or an urgent care. Because I think they're getting overrun with the people, the unhoused population too, especially in this cold snap, right?
How much do you wish you had someone there that you could, like, you said you have a social worker. I think you called them an angel, but they can't take someone.
No, but I wish we could have a bus out front, a warm place. Go sit in that bus, and when the bus is full, they'll take you to the shelter.
I know that you had said that when you agreed to speak with us, that part of it was because you wanted to be a strong voice, you said, for your work family, that you really are drowning and that you need help. I wonder what questions that you think that we should be asking people that are seeking people in power. What questions should we be asking them?
It's really hard to describe the world that I live in. It's really hard, the chaos, I mean, you know, there's a person over there who's screaming about, you know, his shoe was lost and he's on meth and he needs some food and he's yelling and screaming. And then there's a little tiny old lady over here who has a fever and she has cancer. So she's like a C-test too, needs to go in. And it's just the craziness of everything that's going on. It's hard to describe. I actually would like our premier to come or our Minister of Health just to come and see. Come and spend a day. Shadow me for 8 hours. That would be an open invitation.
That's a longtime nurse who has worked in HSC's emergency department. We are withholding her identity to safeguard her job. We will post the full interview, both parts on our podcast and online, and we will ask the Premier more about this in our next full interview with him next week. But there was a lot raised in the nurse being candid with us about what it's like on the front lines. One of the things was, why was the ER able to clear out so quickly and, in her view, efficiently during the Code Orange, during the blizzard that was called in January? So tomorrow on the show, we're going to hear more about the process of what happens when a Code Orange is called. And I just want to thank the nurse for speaking with us here at CBC.
Breaking news happens anywhere, anytime.
Police have warned the protesters repeatedly, get back.
CBC News brings the story to you as it happens.
Hundreds of wildfires are burning.
Be the first to know what's going on and what that means for you and for Canadians.
This situation has changed very quickly.
Helping make sense of the world when it matters most. Stay in the know. CBC News.
Well, let's talk about making sense of the world when it matters most. I don't know about you, but over the weekend, everyone was talking about Donald Trump, different threats that have been made. Obviously, the word annexation has come up. The Prime Minister Friday said Trump's comments about making Canada the 51st state are a, quote, real thing, unquote. So we asked you this morning how you are processing that. And I know there's been lots of different signs out there. Like in Polo Park, I was sharing earlier in the show, Corey Funk's popped in to help me through the comments here. I saw this T-shirt that that said, Canada is not for sale. So, I mean, patriotism's on display everywhere. But we asked how people are processing that. So we'll go back and forth here with what you've been writing to us. First of all, Marianne Clark, she writes, I believe that we're living with our heads in the sand if we don't take seriously what he says and what is in Project 2025. Liz Kroom saying, I want to live in a country that values all citizens regardless of their religion, skin color, or gender. This fight is not just about economics. And Kirsten Neal saying Trump wants Canada to be his Ukraine.
We got this one from Chris Brandon. He says it's all about power. Trump wants everything, whether it's Canada, Greenland, or all of our resources. How easy any of that would be to accomplish is anyone's guess, but it should be taken seriously. Trump has been and only will ever be in this for himself. He doesn't care about his people and has no interest in any coalition with allies. Every interaction he has with anyone has the intent of leading to a business transaction that benefits him and no one else. In the simplest terms, that's who he is. He is only interested in doing anything that is for white, rich America. So there's that.
I have one more here, and then you can take it away, Corey, with the rest of yours. This comes from Donna Rutkowski. Donna writes, this past weekend, I was running errands with my husband when I noticed something. Early in the Ukraine-Russia war, I was astounded at how everyday Ukrainians were going about their business like nothing was happening. And she writes, now we're doing the same. If you believe Trump is all we have to worry about, you're mistaken. Protecting our sovereignty includes stopping Trump and protecting our Arctic land, sea, and ice. I also think we should be strengthening trade outside of North America. Trump may not leave. We have to find a way to go forward with the U.S. And so, again, we're asking you on Facebook. That's what we're reading from, your thoughts and how you're processing all the threats coming from the States. What else are people saying, Corey?
Yeah, Alison Blythe running with this personal story. I left the U.S. and am fully and only Canadian now because of the way it was managed and do not want to return to that. I'm a physician and our healthcare system is much better. The poor suffer in the U.S., as do the middle class. I would have gone bankrupt with my breast cancer treatment in the States. We do not want to adopt their view on Indigenous people. They basically ignore them, she says. The U.S. is not kind to others, and that is anyone different than white, cisgender, heterosexual folks.
Let's actually leave it there.
Yeah.
Lots of comments coming in, so we don't have time to share all of them, but you have time to weigh in, read them, call our listener line, 788-3205, as we continue to process what's happening here. Not to, amp up any fear or anxiety, but just to really acknowledge that a lot of us are trying to make sense of this. So contextual interviews coming up in the days ahead here on InfoRad. To get us to the news, though, why don't we listen to Little Blue Rodeo, who is celebrating 40 years of the band. This is Till I'm Myself Again.
I wanna know where my confidence went. One day it all disappeared. I'm lying in a hotel room miles away. Voices next door in my head. Where daytimes are dragged, night times worse. Hope that I can get home soon. But the half-finished bottles of inspiration lie like ghosts in my room. Well,
Touching a bit of Blue Rodeo this morning. And hard to believe, but it's been 40 years since the band played their first ever public performance at the Rivoli Club on Queen Street in Toronto. I'm Marcy Marcusa. This is CBC, and your news is next.
This is CBC News. Good morning. I'm Heather Wells in Winnipeg. At 8:30, it's minus 19 in Winnipeg. Temperature isn't moving far today. It's a cold one. Minus 18 with a risk of frostbite in western Manitoba. A multi-day extreme cold event is how Environment Canada terms it. Wind chills close to minus 40. U.S. President Donald Trump says he will be imposing 25% tariffs today on steel and aluminum imports entering the United States. And the countries he's expected to target include Canada. As the tariff threats play out, Canada's ambassador to France, Stéphane Dion, says the Canadian government is actively working with EU countries to push back against any expanded American trade action.
Canada and Mexico are the first ones, but Europeans know that they may be targeted as well. Working with us about how can we have a cohesive way to convince the U.S. administration that trade wars are painful for everyone and not something that you should do between friends.
Canada's Industry Minister, François-Philippe Champagne, points out Canadian steel and aluminum are essential to American defense projects as well as the country's auto industry. Now, some Manitoba businesses are seeing greater demand for their products as calls to buy local grow louder. Sean Black owns and operates Sheepdog Brew, specializing in cold brew coffee. Just this past week, he received many calls asking him to put his product on grocery store shelves. He recently signed a deal with Sobeys and Safeway, placing his product in stores right across the province.
As this more nationalist movement goes on, we're going to see more of those big businesses looking to support other Canadian brands. And I really hope that we're there to ride that wave along with them.
Black says they plan to double production this year to keep up with demand. In a statement, Sobeys spokesperson says in light of recent developments, they're working to amplify this very successful local program while also accelerating the sourcing of Canadian products as alternatives to products on the tariff list. A longtime nurse at Manitoba's largest hospital says the healthcare system has been broken for most of her career. The nurse has worked for decades in the emergency room at Winnipeg's Health Sciences Centre. She says frontline healthcare workers sometimes endure pure chaos. CBC has concealed the nurse's voice and identity to protect her job.
There's a person over there who's screaming about, his shoe was lost and he's on meth and he needs some food and he's yelling and screaming. And then there's a little tiny old lady over here who has a fever and she has cancer. So she's like a C-test too, needs to go in. And it's just the craziness of everything that's going on. It's hard to describe.
On Friday, Premier Wab Kinew said in order for the province to fix health care, it needs more people on the front lines. He says there are 1,255 more healthcare staff now working in Manitoba than last April, and more security staff, he says, will be added across the system. A new student-run mental health club for men has recently launched at the University of Manitoba. Student Barris Tavis says men still face stigma when it comes to showing emotion.
They see it as a sign of weakness. I believe it's social media's fault too. The recent surge of, the man has to be tough, take care of the family. You cannot take care of a family if you cannot take care of yourself. That includes mental being as well, right?
Tavis says while he has a strong support network, he knows it's not always easy for people his age to talk about their mental health. Varma's Men's Wellness Circle recently had its first event called Wings and Wellness. And breaking barriers. The third annual Lunar New Year hockey tournament celebrating Asian culture. Ray Kamfu played goal for the team Whitesnake. He says growing up in a small Alberta town, he didn't get to play hockey until he was in his 20s.
There was no outreach. There was a lot of barriers. There was just no ability for anybody who didn't know how to get into hockey to get into hockey. My parents were both immigrants during the Vietnam War, and English was a barrier. Finances was a barrier, and just knowledge of the sport was a barrier.
Now, Kamfu says his young son is playing hockey. This weekend's 4-day event was hosted by the Winnipeg Emperors Hockey Club. You can find more Manitoba news updated throughout the day. All you have to do is head to cbc.ca/Manitoba.
Thank you, Heather.
You're welcome.
Thanks to our news department this morning, Heather Wells and Alana Cole and Megan Ketchison out there. And to our live team, Kevin Ipatebo, our producer of YouTube, as well as Marshall Hodgins behind the controls today. And big thanks to Corey Funk as well, who's been directing and covering weather traffic, which is what he's here for now.
Minus 19 right now in Winnipeg. The high today is minus 18. So that's pretty much where we're going to stay all day. Extreme cold warning effect for much of southwestern Manitoba, Brandon, Clarny, Melita, Verdun, Dauphin, and Minnedosa. As for the traffic out there, there's a stopped semi on northbound Pembina and Plaza. It's in the median and left turn lane, so it's blocking that. That might cause some backups for folks. As well, there's a stopped truck, Henderson and Chief Peguis Trail westbound in the curb lane. It's blocked, so you expect delays there on Chief Peguis. That's westbound Chief Peguis. Backed up all the way to Rothesay.
All right, thanks, Corey.
Thank you.
Also, thanks to people who specifically in our unit worked on items in today's program. They are associate producer Chidi Akuma, as well as reporter in unit Jim Agapito, producer Robin Summerfield, producer Wendy Parker, producer Donna Carrero, and senior producer of audio at CBC Manitoba, Leif Larson. Thank you all for joining us this morning, and thanks to all of our guests who have shared their stories with us today. Appreciate y'all. Take care, be well. My name is Marcy Marcusa, and coming up next, it's The Current on CBC.